Chapter 166. With that in mind, the officials all turned to look at the officials from the Ministry of Rites who had come to attend the banquet. Hu Xiao was the Minister of Rites and had been for many years at that. At least a third of the officials in the ministry had been promoted by him or had close ties to him. This time his granddaughter was getting married. Many officials from the Ministry of Rites had come to show their support. When these officials noticed the gazes of their peers, they all lowered their heads. This proved that Yang Qindong hadn't informed the Ministry of Rites about taking concubines. As if he'd known that everyone would react this way, Yang Qindong smiled at them and said, "I didn't inform the Ministry of Rites beforehand, but I did inform the Minister of Rites. I'll make it up to you later. I only did this because I wanted to give the three of them a pleasant surprise." As he spoke, Yang Qindong's gentle gaze fell on Xiao Yin, Madame Shui and Madame Xiang. His gaze was filled with love. Yang Qindong's actions had indeed given the three women a pleasant surprise. As for their reactions, they'd all been recorded by Yang Si. When the officials heard that Yang Qindong had told the Minister of Rites that they'd be reported to the Minister of Rites after the banquet, they all came to a sudden realization. Since that was the case, what did they have to worry about? Besides, what did it have to do with them? In reality, Yang Qindong hadn't told Hu Xiao about this. What kind of joke was this? He was marrying someone else's granddaughter, and he was also marrying 3 concubines at the same time. It would be strange if Hu Xiao agreed. However, he dared to say this because he was sure that Hu Xiao wouldn't expose him. Otherwise, if he got into trouble, Hu Yan would also suffer. When the results were announced, it first drew a lot of discussion, but Yang Qindong easily resolved it. After that, he led the 4 women in a toast to the guests. Speaking of which, Hu Yan and the others weren't women who only knew how to stay at home. They'd all seen the world, and with Yang Qindong's guidance, they didn't show any signs of fear. Instead, they generously raised their cups and toasted. The atmosphere was quite harmonious. At the same time, the Immortal Abode's band and actors began to sing and dance outside the Yang clan's courtyard. It was a lively scene. Among the guests, Han Ji also received Yang Qindong's wedding invitation. Out of camaraderie, he was pulled over by Shangguan Lv Gui. At this time, when he saw Yang Qindong with the 4 women, his teeth itched with hatred. "Commander, this Yang Qindong is getting bolder and bolder. He didn't even report taking concubines. He dared to act first and report later. This clearly shows that he doesn't put the laws of the great Ming dynasty in his eyes. We cannot allow this to continue." How could Lu Gui not know that Yang Qindong's actions today were a bit out of line? However, he knew that Han Ji's main motive was revenge. It was because his brother-in-law Wang Go had been killed by Yang Qindong. That was why he said those words with hatred. But no matter what kind of mentality he had, Han Ji was still one of them. If a superior wanted his subordinates to listen to his orders, he had to empathize with his subordinates. Thus he nodded and said, "All right, we'll discuss it when we get back. We'll teach him a lesson." "Thank you, Commander, for your help." When Han Ji heard that Lv Gui was finally ready to make a move, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. He quickly raised his arms and used Yang Qindong's wedding wine to toast Lv Gui. The funny thing was that he was also scheming against Yang Qindong. All banquets must come to an end. Although the programs were endless, the guests still left one by one when the sky was almost dark. Among them, there was someone who didn't want to leave. That was the second brother, Yang Rang. At noon, Yang Qindong toasted each table. He had more or less spoken to the guests, but he acted as if he didn't see his second brother. Not only that, even his sisters-in-law treated him like heir. The facts had already shown that Yang Qindong was very angry with him. Since he had come today, he naturally wanted to use this opportunity to perform well and strive to turn hostility into friendship. "Second brother, let's go. Today is not suitable for doing other things." The eldest brother, Yang Gong, walked in front of Yang Rang with a face full of alcohol. The behavior of his second brother a while ago, even he was extremely unhappy after seeing it. But after all, they were still brothers. He couldn't just watch Yang Rang be unlucky. "Big brother." Seeing Yang Gong walk over, Yang Rang showed an amiable and even fawning smile. "Big brother, you must tell little Six that I did it for the good of the Yang family manor. In that case, even if I didn't do it, others would do it. At least if I did, I would have given the Yang family a way out, right?" Listening to Yang Rang's sophistry, Yang Gong was very disgusted. He could say so many reasons for doing bad things. He was really shameless to the extreme. "'Kay, let's talk about it later. Let's go first." Yang Gong didn't agree. He just wanted to take his second brother away so that he wouldn't stay and cause trouble and attract the displeasure of his sixth brother. If that happened, it would really spoil the beautiful atmosphere. His eldest brother did not agree to plead for mercy and just wanted to drag him away. How could Yang Rang be willing to comply? His face immediately changed. "All right, since eldest brother doesn't care about our brotherhood and is unwilling to help second brother to plead for mercy, then you can leave by yourself. In short, I will wait here. If little six doesn't come out, I won't go anywhere today. I want to see if he really doesn't recognize me as his elder brother. If this matter spreads out, who will look good at that time?" Yang Rang shamelessly shook off Yang Gong's arm and then looked at the inner courtyard of the Yang family manor. He looked like he wouldn't leave until he saw the main person. "You." He didn't expect his brother to be such a person. Shamelessness is invincible. At this moment, Yang Gong didn't know what to do. At this moment, a group of people walked out from the inner courtyard. The person in the lead was a woman. It was the eldest sister of the Yang family, Yang Fei. Although they were all from the Yang family, the treatment was obviously different. When Yang Fei walked out, there were 4 brides beside her. Every one of them accompanied her and talked. From time to time, one could see the eldest sister of the Yang family smiling. When he saw his eldest sister walking out, Yang Rang quickly turned around to avoid her. He wasn't afraid of his eldest brother Yang Gong because his eldest brother's ability was mediocre and not worthy of his attention. However, his eldest sister was different. Most of them grew up following behind Yang Fei. When they were young, they were rarely taught a lesson by their eldest sister. As a result, when they grew up, there was still a fear in their hearts. Yang Rang wanted to avoid her, but now that most of the guests had left, there was only a limited number of people left. Yang Fei only needed to sweep her eyes and naturally saw him. When she saw that it was her disappointing second brother who was pacing back and forth, she immediately figured out what was going on. Her face immediately darkened. As the eldest sister, Yang Fei naturally hoped to see the Yang brothers and sisters united. Even if someone did something wrong, if she could give them a chance to forgive, she would be willing to give them the chance. However, as Yang Qindong's second brother, Yang Rang had done something wrong first, and then he wanted to seek justice on the day of the wedding. This was really a bit aggressive. She took large strides and arrived behind Yang Rang, who had just turned around. Yang Gong, who was standing at the side, saw Yang Fei first and quickly called out with a smile, "Eldest sister." When he heard his eldest brother's call, Yang Rang knew that he couldn't avoid it. He could only unwillingly turn around and force out a smile. "Hello, eldest sister. You still recognize me as your eldest sister? Since that's the case, then leave immediately. Today is my little brother's wedding day. Do you have to stay here and cause trouble?" Yang Fei said with a cold face and a rude tone. "Eldest sister, that's not what I meant. I just want to talk to little six and explain what happened before." How could Yang Rang admit it? He spoke with a face full of excuses. Hearing Yang Rang call Yang Qindong little six as if he was the boss, Yang Fei was even angrier. She thought about how her little brother had done so many things for the Yang family and even saved Ingzong on the battlefield. That was how dangerous it was to be conferred the title of Marquis. However, there was someone in the family who was dragging her family down. This was truly a chilling action. If she was in Yang Fei's shoes, she would also feel very uncomfortable. With this anger, Yang Fei couldn't be bothered to be polite anymore. She turned to look at Beta Persei and the rest and said, "Go chase Yang Rang out of the manor. If he doesn't leave, you can beat him until he leaves. I will bear all the consequences. I believe that even if father and mother are watching from the heavens, they won't blame me." Yes. Beta Persei had long found Yang Rang an eyesore. This person was lucky to have been born into the Yang family. If it had been anyone else, who knew how many times they would have died by now. After agreeing, Beta Persei strode forward and lifted Beta Persei off the ground with a thick arm. He didn't seem to use any effort to lift him off the ground. The pitiful Beta Persei was dragged out of the manor like a rabbit, then thrown to the ground. If little six had ordered someone to do this, he would naturally yell and scream, saying that the other party didn't respect his elder brother. However, since his eldest sister had ordered it, there was nothing he could do. He was the one who had been rude first. Now that he had been thrown out, he was reaping what he sowed. Even though he was still unwilling, Yang Rang had no choice but to stand up with the help of the servants outside the manor. He then entered the palanquin and left the place. In the study of the Yang Manor, Yang Qindong was listening to Tiger's Mane's report. The report included the situation in the Immortal abode, as well as the various performances of the officials who had attended the banquet today. The people from the security bureau had disguised themselves as attendants and wandered around the banquet, listening in on everyone's conversations. This was the true record of an official's appearance. At the very least, through this, Yang Qindong could see who had opinions of him and who were dissatisfied with him. Young Master, the embroidered uniform guard just sent someone to deliver this. They said that in order to stabilize the situation in the capital, Young Master is invited to the embroidered uniform guard's office tomorrow morning to discuss political matters. After Tiger's Mane reported the situation at the banquet, he told Yang Qindong the news he had just received. Chapter 167. Mao Rabbit. Time was from 5 to 7 o'clock, with 6 o'clock as the time. Letting Yang Qindong go to the meeting so early was obviously not to let the bridegroom have a good night's sleep. It was too obvious that he was deliberately making things difficult for Yang Qindong. In this regard, Yang Qindong just responded with a cold snort, and then ignored it as if he hadn't heard the news. After dealing with the business, Hu Mang tactfully excused himself. Today was the young master's big day, so he had to be tactful to stay far away from the scene. With no one bothering him anymore, Yang Qindong straightened his clothes and walked towards Hu Yan's courtyard in the inner courtyard. Tonight he was going to perform the Duke of Zhou's rites with her. When he thought of this, his footsteps seemed to quicken. In the bridal chamber, Hu Yan, who had just sent away her elder sister Yang Fei, had returned. After removing her makeup, she changed into a red bridal dress and sat by the bed, waiting. At this time the room was very quiet, and only the sound of Hu Yan's little heart beating could be heard. Although she had long thought that there would be a day like this and even looked forward to it. But when she really arrived, she still felt a little nervous. In particular, the servant girl Xiaoqing was nowhere to be found, and no one accompanied her to talk, so the tense atmosphere was even more intense. Creak. The door was pushed open from the outside. Out of instinct, Hu Yan blurted out, "Is it Xiaoqing?" "What? You don't like Lu Lang but Xiaoqing?" With a man's magnetic voice, Yang Qindong, who had changed into a loose red robe, stepped in. Seeing that it was Yang Qindong, Hu Yan's heart beat faster. No. What do you mean by no? Do you like Lu Lang more or Xiaoqing more?" Yang Qindong knew that she was nervous, but he still teased her, which was also a way to relieve her tension. I like Lu Lang more." At this time Hu Yan's voice was very low. If it weren't for Yang Qindong's good hearing, he probably wouldn't have heard what she was saying. After saying this, she had lowered her head. He didn't need to look to know how red her face was right now. After seeing the answer he was satisfied with, Yang Qindong strode forward, picked up Hu Yan and put her on the bed. At the same time he waved his sleeve and all the red candles in the room were extinguished. "I like Yan too." After a short sentence, a series of rustling sounds could be heard, and then the moon, which was originally hanging in the sky, was now nowhere to be seen. Soon the entire courtyard was filled with extravagant sounds, 10,000 words omitted. Happy time always passed quickly and the sky slowly brightened. At the embroidered uniform guard's office, seeing that the time had passed and Yang Qindong still hadn't arrived, Hanji acted as if he had won the lottery. He quickly went to LV Gray, who was sitting there with his eyes closed. "Commander, he didn't come. It seems like he doesn't take your words seriously at all." LV Gray didn't even open his eyes after hearing this. No one knew what he was thinking. His eyeballs kept rolling. According to Hanji's understanding of LV Gray, he was really angry at this time. It seemed that Yang Qindong wouldn't have a good time. That was the truth. LV Gray still didn't open his eyes, but the words he said made Hanji feel very relieved. "Yang Qindong didn't listen to your orders. Suspend his duties first and spread this decision to all the embroidered uniform guards." Suspension for not attending the meeting. This was LV Gray's trap for Yang Qindong. Or it could be said that he had already planned this, so when he said this he didn't hesitate at all. Yes. Hanji was waiting for this sentence. After he agreed, he turned around and left. He was eager to spread the news and let all the embroidered uniform guards know. In the future he would like to see how arrogant Marquis would be in the future. The embroidered uniform guards and the East faction guards had always been the focus of the security bureau. If there was a situation here, it would be sent to the Yang family village and sent to the director Tiger's man. As for when to show it to the young master, it was up to the director to decide whether the situation was serious or not. After tossing and turning for half the night, Hu Yan fell asleep tired. She vaguely felt that someone was moving beside her. In her mind, she suddenly thought that she was no longer the young lady of the Hu family, but the daughter-in-law of the Yang family. She immediately struggled to get up. "Well, baby, sleep a little more. A woman must have enough sleep. Also, there are not so many rules here." Yang Qindong's voice came to her ear. Then she felt a heat on her forehead and their lips came in close contact. After kissing Hu Yan's forehead, Yang Qindong walked out of the bedroom with a face full of energy. After going out, he saw that Xiaoqing had already prepared the water and was waiting to serve Hu Yan. He smiled and said, "Don't disturb Yan first, let her sleep a little longer. Also, inform the cook Yiqiu to immediately make a fresh nutritious breakfast and send it over when the young lady wakes up." Hearing that Yang Qindong was so concerned about her young lady, Xiaoqing's face was full of joy and she quickly agreed. Yang Qindong strode out of the inner courtyard. From afar he saw Hu Mang waiting for him with a serious expression on his face. Seeing that Hu Mang's brows were almost knitted together, Yang Qindong approached him and asked, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" "Young master, there's a small matter. The embroidered uniform guards just sent a message saying that you didn't come to the meeting. Lu Gui and the others suspended your position in the embroidered uniform guards." Tiger's man's voice became heavier as he spoke. Obviously he had a lot of opinions about this matter. Someone dared to make trouble for the young master. With his character, it was best to kill and teach them a good lesson. Suspended? That's fine. Since it's like this young master can have a good rest as a newlywed. Yang Qindong didn't care after hearing this. It was just a position in the embroidered uniform guards. He really didn't care about it. Moreover, something big was about to happen. Lu Gui's actions were just smashing his own foot with a rock. "Let's go for a jog." Not taking this information seriously, Yang Qindong smiled at Tiger's man and started his morning jog. Tiger's man was happy that the young master's mood wasn't affected by this. He was worried that the young master would be angered, but now it seemed that he worried too much. The young master's mind was as broad as the sea. The news that the valiant Marquis Yang Qindong's position in the embroidered uniform guards was suspended spread like a gust of wind to the ears of all the officials in the capital. Some of the older officials who believed that they had seen and experienced many things couldn't help but sigh. As expected, an official couldn't be too high profile. Just look at the commotion yesterday. Everyone in the capital knew about it. Wasn't he about to suffer retribution soon? Using this matter, Hu knew how many people called the younger generation of their families to teach them to endure silently, learn the way of the mean and not stand out too much. As the main character of this matter, Yang Qindong wasn't as depressed as everyone thought. On the contrary, he was leading the 4 girls, plus 7th sister Yang duo, out of the Yang family manor, heading straight for a place not far away that the common people called Chicken Crow Mountain. Yang Qindong wanted to bring the 5 beauties to the barbecue. For this reason he had Yiqiu prepare a lot of ingredients. Tiger's man, Beta Persei Chiovi's first guard, and 3 squads of Cold Front members accompanied them. Everyone left the manor. It was currently autumn. The maple leaves on the mountain were golden yellow, and the scenery along the way was indescribably beautiful. The 4 girls couldn't stop shouting. Women in ancient times rarely had the opportunity to go out like this. Even if they went out, they were often very strict and weren't allowed to casually look around. How was it like being with Yang Qindong, where they could do whatever they wanted? In the spacious and comfortable carriage, lying down wasn't a problem at all. Every time they saw beautiful scenery, they would take out their only camera to record the beauty. Because of this, the caravan also stopped and traveled. In the afternoon, they finally arrived at the foot of Chicken Crow Mountain, which was 30 li away. Soon, everyone set up the grill, held the charcoal, started the fire, prepared the ingredients and fetched water. The guards also looked around with vigilant eyes. There wasn't the slightest bit of panic, which surprised the 4 girls and made them very happy. The environment in the wilderness was the easiest for people to let their thoughts run wild. Because of this, their mood was also very good. Later on, they even followed a few maids to make skewers out of curiosity. It wasn't enough to just do it themselves, so they even pulled Yang Qindong over. Thus, the dignified marquis of the Great Ming Dynasty actually started working there with the servants. This isn't good. Seventh sister Yang Duo really couldn't believe the scene in front of her. Her husband, Wang Go, used to be just an insignificant official, but he had always stayed away from the kitchen. The idea of a gentleman staying away from the kitchen was deeply rooted in people's hearts at that time. But look at Yang Qindong. Even though he had the title of marquis and owned such a large family property, he still worked with everyone. From this point alone, the biggest difference between him and the others was that Yang Qindong was different from others. There's nothing bad about it. Since we came out to play and eat, of course the atmosphere will be better if everyone works together. Hu Yan and Yang Duo had the best relationship, and the distance between them was also the closest. Naturally, they heard the whispering just now. But Yang Duo still wanted to say something. No buts. Lu Lang didn't refuse. I think he is willing to do such a thing. As his sister, you don't have to care so much. You should hurry up and work. Don't be outdone by others. Hu Yan chuckled. After completing the experience of turning from a girl to a woman last night, her mind didn't seem to be as mature as before. At this time she was completely like a child. If it wasn't for the torment last night and her body didn't allow it, she would probably start jumping around in a while. Chapter 168. Yang Duo's doubts were quickly led astray by Hu Yan. In just a short while, not only did she not let her sixth brother Yang Qindong rest, she even took out a portion of the tasks in front of her and placed them in front of him. In her words, it was called, "Capable people do more work." When Yang Qindong was a soldier in his previous life, he did everything very quickly. Naturally, the speed at which he worked was not something these young ladies could compare to. With Yang Duo taking the lead, Hu Yan quickly placed her own skewers in front of Yang Qindong. Not only that, she also brought Qiao Yin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang's skewers over. Qiao Yin and the other two naturally did not dare to mess around like Hu Yan. They could only look at Yang Qindong with an awkward and slightly nervous expression. You guys are too much of a bully. Looking at the mountain of skewers in front of him, Yang Qindong showed a helpless expression, causing the women to laugh out loud. Even Tiger's Mane's wife Feng Er and Yang Xi's wife Mu Lily could not help but cover their mouths and chuckle. At that moment, the two women were greeted by their husbands' stern gaze. What the young master did with his wives was considered a pleasure in the boudoir. Outsiders were absolutely not allowed to comment on anything. Tiger's Mane and Yang Xi had been with Yang Qindong for a long time, so they naturally understood this principle. After being glared at, the two women curled their lips and looked as if they were not afraid. However, they turned around and busied themselves with their work. Obviously, they were not afraid of their husband, but they knew that they had to give face at the right time. This way they could live a happy life. Looking at Yang Qindong in the face of the work that was completely beyond one person's ability, he waved his hand and called Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Yang Xi over. Put it on. I'll leave this work to the three of you. But, young master, this... Tiger's Mane and the other two looked troubled. If they were asked to charge and break through enemy lines, they would definitely not object. However, when it came to this kind of work, the three of them were really a little embarrassed and unhappy. What is this? The young master asked you to do something and you're still making excuses? Let me tell you, this job is going to be done by the three of you. You have to finish it. Also, spread the news to Crimson City. Let them train a female army. The number doesn't need to be too big, just about 200 people will be enough. In the future, it's better to let them protect Madam. Also, it's better to let them do the delicate work. Yang Qindong sighed. He didn't want a group of men to protect his women. It would be inconvenient. It was better to prepare and train some female soldiers in advance. That's a good idea, a good idea. I've long heard from Xiaofeng that there are many girls in Crimson City who want to become soldiers. But other than entering the propaganda team, there doesn't seem to be a better opportunity. Now that we have a female army, the problem will be solved. Beta Persei laughed foolishly. What problem has been solved? Is it your marriage? Tiger's Mane laughed after hearing this. Among the few of them, Tiger's Mane and Yang Xi's personal problems had been solved. Only Beta Persei had not made any progress in this regard. It was no wonder that Tiger's Mane said this. No. The burly Beta Persei blushed when Tiger's Mane said this. He wanted to argue about something. However, when Yang Chendong saw this, he smiled and said, Tiger's Mane is right. Beta Persei, you're already 20 years old. It's time for you to find a wife. Work is important, marriage is also important, and carrying on the family line is even more important. Since Yang Chendong said this, Beta Persei could not refute. He could only lower his head and agree. However, anyone could see that he was really uncomfortable holding it in. He wanted to find a chance to learn from Tiger's Mane. They skewered the meat and started to roast it. The sky gradually darkened. Fortunately, Lung Feng had already prepared dry wood. He set them together and lit them up. As a result, a huge bonfire was formed. When the bonfire was lit, the flames burned fiercely. A sense of warmth instantly spread throughout everyone's body. Bonfire, the fragrance of meat, good wine, beautiful women. When all of this was put together, it formed a very beautiful picture. Very soon, other than Leng Feng, who was on sentry duty and in charge of safety, everyone else, including Yang Chendong and his 4 wives, left the scene and gathered around the bonfire to dance and sing. Everyone's cheeks were red and all of them were beaming with joy. Hu Yan's left hand was held by Yang Chendong, and on her right was Yang Duo. Her hands were raised from time to time and her legs were kicking and jumping. Her face was like a peach blossom and she was extremely happy. This kind of life was something she had never dared to imagine before. It was so unrestrained, free and even freewheeling. And it seemed that her future life could be accompanied by this. How could it not make people yearn for it and feel relaxed and happy? They did not know how long they had been dancing and singing. They drank a lot of wine, and under Dong Shuai's intentional or unintentional actions, Hu Yan was a little drunk. It was already very late. When everyone was tired, Hu Yan felt her body being lifted into the air. She was carried onto Yang Chendong's back and they entered a spacious and sturdy tent that had already been set up. Hu Yan knew that beautiful things like last night would happen again. Just when she was feeling shy, Yang Chendong had gone out and walked in again. This time he was holding Xiao Yin in his arms. The sudden appearance of another woman made Hu Yan feel a burst of shyness and surprise. The joy of a boudoir was certainly something that people yearned for, but why did he bring another person out? Before Hu Yan could figure it out, Lady Shuai and Lady Xiang were also carried into the tent by Yang Chendong. The other 3 women had already seen this kind of thing. They slept together, so of course they knew what Dong Shuai was going to do. They were a little shy and a little excited. Hu Yan, on the other hand, was completely unaware. Just when she was wondering why there were so many people, all of a sudden, a big hand began to wander around her body. That feeling made her feel comfortable and shy. She forced herself to stay awake and said, Lu Lang, don't do this. There are others. Not others. They are all your sisters. Let's do it together. Yang Chendong said very soberly. Under his skillful methods, Hu Yan was quickly turned into a pile of mud. Then she was completely at his mercy. In her consciousness she seemed to see a few white bodies. Then she fainted happily. For a moment, the garden was filled with intoxicating spring. A ray of sunlight slowly shone through the tent and shone on Hu Yan's face. She felt the warmth and slowly opened her eyes. What came into view was that Xiao Yin and the other women were still sleeping. Ah! She could not help but exclaim. Her mind instantly recalled some of the things that happened last night. Since she was young, she had never been taught such words and thoughts in her education. For a moment she could not believe that something like this would happen to her. Xiao Yin, Lady Shuai, and Lady Xiang had already woken up. After all, it was not the first time they had done this. Their physical recovery was naturally much better than Hu Yan's. It was only because they did not know how to face it that they pretended to be asleep. However, after this scream they could no longer pretend. They opened their eyes one by one and saw Hu Yan's tears flowing down the corners of her eyes. Hu Yan's crying made the other 3 women panic. They quickly came forward to comfort her and took the blame, saying that it was all their fault. No. You are not wrong. It's all his fault. I can't accept this. Hu Yan didn't want to be estranged from her sisters as soon as she came here. Although she was the official wife, she had never thought about how to rely on such an identity to bully others. Please don't blame Sir. I'm sure Big Sister doesn't know that Sir is especially good in that aspect. None of us can satisfy him. Xiao Yin hated it when people talked bad about Yang Chendong. Even if the person who spoke was Hu Yan, she was still unhappy. Yes, second sister is right. Sir is indeed very good in that aspect. It's not something we can handle alone. Lady Shui hurriedly said to Xiao Yin. Sir is working hard outside for our happiness. There are many things he needs to consider. We are just serving him. If we can't satisfy him in this aspect, then aren't we too useless? Among the women, Lady Xiang, who became Yang Qindong's woman one step ahead of Hu Yan, also expressed her attitude. They did not know when it started, or maybe it was yesterday, but they had automatically made a list. Hu Yan was Yang Qindong's first wife, so she was naturally the eldest sister. Xiao Yin had been with Yang Qindong the longest, so she was naturally the second sister. Lady Shui was the third sister and Lady Xiang was the fourth sister. As for whether there would be a fifth sister after that, it was already set in stone. Xiao Yin had said that there was a girl named Luan Xiaoyu in their hometown who also liked Yang Qindong very much. Yang Qindong also liked her, but because she was too young they still had to wait. If there was a fifth sister, then who knew if there would be a sixth sister and a seventh sister. However, seeing that Yang Qindong was so young and had such a big family business, it was not surprising that there would be sisters joining him. Hu Yan didn't expect that she would immediately be met with the common resistance of her three younger sisters when she said Yang Qindong's fault in a fit of pique. She quickly changed her words and said, I don't mean to blame him. It's because things came too suddenly and I can't accept it, so it's normal that you can't accept it. I don't blame big sister for having such thoughts. However, from now on, we sisters will not forgive anyone who says anything bad about sir. Especially big sister. You must set an example for us. Xiao Yin said this with a rare serious expression. In her heart, Yang Qindong was the sky, the earth, and her everything. Chapter 169. Oh, I got it. Hu Yan, who had clearly suffered a loss, was now like a child who had done something wrong. She lowered her head and pursed her lips. However, it had to be said that after such a conversation, she had diluted the matter of sleeping together. She who had been persuaded had also begun to consider Yang Qindong. At the foot of Chicken Crow Mountain, Yang Qindong had just returned from his morning run when he was stopped by seventh sister, Yang Duo. What's the matter, seventh sister? Did someone bully you? Yang Qindong pretended to be angry when he saw the anger in Yang Duo's eyes. Her eyes weren't eyes and her nose wasn't nose. But in reality he knew very well what seventh sister was here for and what she wanted to say. Sixth brother, aren't you going too far? I heard that last night you. What happened last night? Did seventh sister not rest well? If so, go back and have a good rest now. If you want to go back to the Yang family village, I can send someone to send you back now. As for other things, let's not talk about them. Yang Qindong saw that the other party was bluntly talking about what happened last night and seemed to want to interfere in his family matters. Yang Qindong used words to block her. In the end, he still had to rely on himself to live his own life. As for other people's opinions, it was just a one-sided opinion and did not represent anything. Perhaps Yang Qindong was very easy to talk to when it did not involve matters of principle. However, when it came to some matters, his words carried enormous weight. Once he made a decision, he would not change it. Yang Qindong's tone suddenly became a little stiff. Yang Duo could not accept it for a moment. Sixth brother, you've changed? It's not that I've changed. It's just that seventh sister has never seriously understood me. Yang Qindong shook his head and looked at Yang Duo very seriously. They were family and had a blood relationship, so he would not watch anyone bully his seventh sister. However, this was not a reason for the other party to interfere in his life. With just one sentence, Yang Duo suddenly became speechless. Yes, she really did not understand Yang Qindong. Ever since her youngest brother had appeared in the capital, she had always been surprised by his appearance. Some matters seemed reckless, but they ended with a cause and effect. Some matters seemed unsolvable, but as long as sixth brother made a move, he would always be able to grasp the crux of the matter and solve it in one step. As a woman, she was only judging from her own point of view. But was her point of view really correct? Even Hu Yan, as the mistress of the house, did not express any doubts. What reason and authority did he have to say anything? I'm sorry, sixth brother. I'm thinking too much. I think I should go back to the tent and have a good rest. Yang Duo suddenly felt that her behavior was a bit reckless. For a moment, she wanted to find a quiet place to think about it. After saying this, Yang Duo turned around and left. This time Yang Qindong didn't stop him. He knew that there were some things that he had to figure out himself. Seventh sister, who had already experienced a failed marriage, was most afraid of being hurt in this aspect. Speaking of which, she reminded her out of kindness. However, Yang Duo forgot one thing. Yang Qindong was not Wang Go. After Yang Duo left, Yang Qindong strode back into the tent. After what had happened to seventh sister, he was even prepared to be scolded by Hu Yan. This was his woman and he should love her. No matter what Hu Yan said, he was prepared to not talk back. When he entered the tent, Qiao Yin and the other two girls had already left. Only the maid Xiaoqing was there to dress Hu Yan. When she saw Yang Qindong enter, Xiaoqing quickly bowed and said, "Master. And how about this? You can leave for a moment. I have something to discuss with Madam." Yang Qindong smiled and nodded to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing naturally knew that she would spend the rest of her life with Hu Yan and Yang Qindong. How could she dare to refuse such a small request? She agreed and immediately left. When only the two of them were left in the tent, Hu Yan lowered her head with a blush. Hu Yan was shy. After all, she and her three sisters served Yang Qindong last night. It was a shameful thing. She couldn't adapt for a while and couldn't face it. However, when Yang Qindong saw this scene, he thought that she was angry at him. He hurriedly squatted down and said, "It's my fault. I didn't consider your feelings. I was too agitated, so, no." His mouth was suddenly blocked by Hu Yan's small hand. "Boing, don't say that. As your wife, I didn't consider your feelings. Last night I was willing." The more she spoke, the lower her head. In the end, her head was about to plunge into Yang Qindong's arms. He didn't expect such a result. For a moment, Yang Qindong was overjoyed. "Really? You're the best. I love you so much." In ancient times, the word love was not so easily spoken. Even when husband and wife spoke words of love, they rarely used the word love. However, when Yang Qindong said the word love, Hu Yan was overjoyed. She felt that she had made the right decision by listening to Qiao Yin and the others. In her happiness, she said happily, "Lulang, I didn't understand you before. You were too tired. As your wife, as long as you're happy, you can do whatever you want in the future." But Yang Qindong had already thought it through. It must be Qiao Yin and the others who did Hu Yan's work that resulted in such a delicious result. He was instantly even more satisfied with Qiao Yin and the others. Originally, he had to spend a lot of effort to persuade them. Unexpectedly, he didn't need to say anything and the matter was resolved. In his happiness, Yang Qindong held Hu Yan's little face and kissed it. With this kiss, Hu Yan felt her entire body go soft. She said shyly and carefully, "Husband, if you want to, can you wait until night time? After all, it's broad daylight. If others find out, I'm afraid it won't be good." Seeing that Hu Yan seemed to be a little moved, Yang Qindong laughed. However, he also knew that Hu Yan's skin was probably very thin. At least it wasn't as thick as his. If he didn't let go of this matter, it was very likely that it would cause resentment. Therefore, he intentionally changed the topic. First, he talked about the matter between Xiaoqing and Sun Chuang. They're not young anymore. As their master, you should find a time to arrange their marriage. We'll take care of all the expenses. In short, you can't treat Xiaoqing unfairly. After all, she's been with you for so many years, hasn't she? Thank you, sixth young master. Seeing that Yang Qindong had considered the matter so carefully, Hu Yan was very moved and said, "We're husbands. In the future, there's no need to say thanks. Everything I do for you is what I should do. By the way, my seventh sister seems to have some complaints about what happened last night. Do you think you should personally go and have a good talk with her? I don't want her to misunderstand me, hee." Yang Qindong thought about it and decided to leave the job of persuading seventh sister to Hu Yan. If Hu Yan took the initiative to persuade her, it would be more effective than 100 words from him. Hearing that seventh sister had complaints, Hu Yan's heart was moved. This was seventh sister standing up for her. She didn't even hesitate to blame her own brother. This sister-in-law was absolutely competent. Hu Yan agreed, and Yang Qindong's heart was completely relieved. Although there were some things that he didn't ask others to understand, they were still family, and understanding was always better than opposing. Just as Yang Qindong was enjoying the happiness of having multiple wives and gaining the understanding of his wife, several groups of fast horses were galloping through the streets of the capital. These brave soldiers had banners with the word Exen written on their backs. As soon as they entered the capital, their faces were gloomy as they spurred their horses forward. Many scheming people had a bad premonition when the messenger didn't shout the news of victory from 600 miles away. This should be a battle report from the front line. If it wasn't a victory report, what could it be? At this time in the imperial court, Zhou Xian had already changed into a dragon robe and was sitting on a huge golden dragon throne. He was looking at the officials and listening to them report on the important matters of the court. Zhou Xian, who had been emperor for some time, had gradually come to like this feeling of being high and mighty. Although he didn't have complete power and had the final say, he had basically controlled the situation. Out of the 6 ministries, 2 of the ministers had been replaced by his favored candidates, Minister of Revenue Jin Lian and Minister of War Yi Ming. These 2 had replaced Wang Zhua and Kuang Yi, who had followed Emperor Ying to Nanjing. These 2 new ministers were very grateful to Zhou Xian for his favor. Naturally, if this substitute emperor had any requests, they would do their best to satisfy them. Of the 6 ministries, the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, had always been a fence-sitter. When Wang Zhen had been present, he had often tried to curry favor with him. Now that Jin Ying had become a head eunuch, he had long since leaned over. In this way, he could also be considered a member of the substitute emperor's faction. Out of the 6 divisions, 3 of them were on her side. Zhou Xian felt even more satisfied. Zhou Xian had come to court in a happy mood, intending to show off his skills and compete with Zhou Xian in governing the country. However, all of this ambition was shattered when a messenger ran into the imperial court to deliver an urgent military report. Important military intelligence from the front line. As soon as the messenger entered the main hall, he knelt on the ground with a thud. It could be seen that he had been running non-stop all this time, so much so that he was a little exhausted. Speak. Hearing that it was a military report from the front line, Zhou Xian straightened his body and looked at the soldier with a face full of expectation. Your Majesty, Admiral Shi Heng was ambushed by Walla's army. The army suffered heavy losses, but Admiral broke out of the encirclement and is resisting the enemy cavalry's advance. Please let me report this to Your Majesty first and ask for reinforcements to be sent. Prepare for a big battle. After the messenger finished speaking in one breath, he felt his vision blur and then fainted from exhaustion. Chapter 170. Quickly, carry him away and treat him. Jin Ying stood at Zhou Qian's side, looking at the unconscious soldiers as she spoke to the Huban soldiers outside the imperial court. After saying this, she felt a shadow flicker at her side. Who else could it be but Daizong? Just as Zhou Qian was about to show off his skills and become a famous monarch to unify the world, he suddenly heard that the front line had been defeated. At this moment, how could he still remain calm? His expression changed greatly, so much so that his body became a little shaky. Dear ministers, how many troops can we mobilize now? Zhou Qian forced himself to stay alert upon hearing this report, and he turned his eyes to the new Minister of War Yi Ming, hoping that he could give a satisfactory result. Yi Ming, courtesy name Zixin, was the son of Yizhi, a man of high intelligence. After ascending the throne, Daizong had sought the favor of the Minister of Rights and was promoted to Minister of War. He was an official who had been promoted on the front lines. When he first arrived at the Bureau of Military Personnel, his seniority was still shallow, so he did not have complete control over the Bureau of Military Personnel. Now that a problem had arisen, Yi Ming felt his head ache. But Yi Ming was still a capable person and he quickly calmed down. After some thought, he went to the Bureau of Military Personnel and looked at the reports from the various factions and calculated a result. Your Majesty, there are currently only 5,000 soldiers in the capital. If we continue to urgently mobilize them, we should be able to mobilize another 5,000 soldiers in 3 days. In half a month, we should be able to gather an army of 50,000 soldiers. For the mighty capital of the Great Ming Dynasty to have so few soldiers was a result that Zhou Qian had not expected. But he knew that since Yi Ming dared to say this, there was no doubt about this result. If this was really the case, how should they deal with the arrival of the Walla's army? Speaking of which, there were many reasons for the current situation in the capital. Unlike in history after the Tumu Fortress incident, Daizong had listened to Yu Qian's words and adopted a defensive strategy. This had led to the defense of the capital and the defeat of the Walla's army. Because of Yang Qindong's arrival, Zhou Xian had been invited to Zhou Xian city long ago to serve him. With the idea gone, Shi Heng took command of the army and sent out the majority of the soldiers in and around the capital. Moreover, Zhu Qizhen had declared himself emperor in Nanjing and taken away a portion of his soldiers, leaving the capital suddenly empty of soldiers. Naturally, they were helpless against Walla's army. At this moment, not only Zhu Qiyu, but the other officials were also staring at each other, unable to find a better idea. As the saying goes, even the cleverest housewife cannot cook without rice. Without sufficient military strength, how can one fight a war? Can one rely on words? If they could win with their mouths, there would be no need for the country to support a large number of troops. Among the ministers, Su Youzhen's eyes kept darting around. Relying on his relationship with Yang Qindong, he was promoted again. He was no longer a part of the imperial censor, but went to Taichung Temple to become a Shaoqing. He was in charge of the country's sacrificial ceremonies and was a fourth-grade official. The reason why he was promoted so quickly was naturally because Yang Qindong had helped him with a lot of money. It was also because the original Shaoqing of Taichung Temple, Huang Yangzheng, went to Nanjing with Yingzong, so there was a vacancy. As a fourth-grade official, Su Youzhen already had a stage to display his ambitions. At this moment, when he saw the emperor and the other ministers' difficult expressions, he really wanted to stand up and propose to move the capital to the south. After all, a gentleman would not stand under a dangerous wall. In fact, in history, Su Youzhen was the main official who proposed this idea. But now this idea just flashed in his mind. It was not for anything else, but because Yingzong had already gone to Nanjing. At this time, what would they mean by going there? It was likely that an internal conflict would be inevitable. And Zhu Qiyu, who was leading the defeated army, really did not know what the chances of winning were. Unable to bring up the matter of moving the capital to the south, Su Youzhen's eyes darted around as he thought of another feasible idea. At this moment, when the other ministers were still thinking about what to do, he had already taken out his ceremonial tablet. He stepped forward and said, "I have something to report." Minister Su, quickly say it. Seeing that everyone had no idea, but one minister still had a suggestion, Zhu Qiyu suddenly had a feeling of hope. "Your Majesty, the army at the front has suddenly lost and the capital is in danger. At this time, the first thing to do is to mobilize the troops near the capital to save the emperor. The second thing to do is to choose a general who can lead the army to block the enemy outside the city wall. This will ensure the stability of the great Ming dynasty." That's right, mobilizing the troops after choosing the general before. Zhu Qiyu felt that it was very reasonable. He immediately said to the Minister of War Yi Ming, "Minister Yi, you can send a letter to mobilize the troops near the capital to protect the capital." "Yes, Your Majesty," Yi Ming replied and then left the court with his ceremonial tablet. "Good, now everyone who can lead the army to fight against the Wall army." Zhu Qiyu's eyes swept across the ministers in the court. The desire in his eyes was very obvious. However, when he asked this question, the entire court fell silent. First, the Tumu Fort's army of 500,000 suffered a crushing defeat, and then General Shi Heng's army of 150,000 was also defeated. Right now, there were only a few thousand men left in the imperial court. Even if they waited for 3 days, their military strength would still be no more than 10,000. How could they resist the elite Walla cavalry? The Walla cavalry could defeat the great Ming army again and again. At this moment, the ministers' faces changed at the mention of this tiger. The crowd of officials didn't speak. This made Zhu Qiyu extremely anxious. What's wrong? Our magnificent great Ming dynasty actually has a great general who can command the 3 armies? Valuing the civil and despising the military had always been the basic national policy of the Ming dynasty. In fact, it was not only the Ming dynasty. It was the same from the earliest Han dynasty to the Tang dynasty and the Song dynasty. After all, the military was strong and the civil was weak, which was not good for the stability of the country. In the Ming dynasty, this situation was even more obvious. Normally, when the military met the civil officials, it was very rare for the military to be able to straighten their backs. It was just like Xixing in the past. However, a Qianhu of the Brocade Guard could bully a famous general Zhang Fu and invade his land. It was no wonder that when Zhu Qiyu asked this question, the civil officials and the military officials did not speak. Is there really no brave general who dares to face the Walla army? Zhu Qiyu asked loudly in anger. At this moment he really wanted to roar. If none of you go, do you want us to personally lead the army? However, when he thought of his elder brother Zhou Xian's end, this thought quickly disappeared without a trace. He did not want to be the second emperor who lost an army. What if he was captured by the enemy when the time came? What should he do? Zhou Xian's face was full of anger. He criticized the officials that he usually raised for being useless. Jin Ying saw that the situation in the court had worsened and reminded him in a low voice, "Your Majesty, this matter needs to be discussed at length. It is better to dismiss the court first and wait until tomorrow morning to make a decision." The courtiers were not completely loyal to him. The most important thing was that there was still Zhou Xian in Nanjing for everyone to rely on. Even if he really got angry here, not only would it be useless, it was likely to lead to a backlash from the courtiers. If they collectively left, then his position as the emperor would come to an end. Forget it, forget it. Everyone go back and think about it carefully. Wait until tomorrow morning. No matter what, you must choose a candidate. Dismiss the court. Zhu Qiu was very helpless. Although he had become the emperor, this emperor did not seem to be as powerful as the previous Ming dynasty emperors. After the officials shouted "Long live the emperor," they left the court and left the palace. After Su Yozhen left the palace hall, she quickly contacted the people of the security bureau and reported the situation in the court today. At this time, Yang Qindong had already returned to the Yang family manor from the foot of Jiming Mountain with the women. Originally, the women wanted to play for a few more days, but tomorrow was the time for Hu Yen to return home. This was an important matter for the first madam, so Yang Qindong naturally had to take care of it. He returned to the Yang family manor in advance to make preparations. On the way back, the people of the security bureau came over and reported everything that happened in the court. The group had stopped. Yang Qindong stood on the side of the road and listened to the report of the staff of the security bureau. In the carriage, Xiao Yin looked at this scene through the curtain and couldn't help but say, "Sir is busy with important matters again. Unfortunately, we can't help much. The only thing we can do is to make him happy when he sees us. Don't make him angry and satisfy all his requests." "You're right, second sister." Lady Xue and Lady Xiang hurriedly agreed. Looking at Hu Yen, although she didn't say anything at this time from her concerned eyes, it could be seen that she had accepted the fact that she slept with him. Even if the other women could understand Yang Qindong as the wife, why couldn't she understand? On the side of the road, after carefully listening to what happened in the court, Yang Qindong sighed. Although the wheel of history had changed because of his appearance, the defense of the capital still had to start as scheduled. Since history had changed, Yang Qindong couldn't accurately predict what would happen, and naturally couldn't make plans in advance. But since the emperor asked to recommend a general to lead the army, he was somewhat interested. First, this was a good opportunity for him to show his talent. Second, it was a good opportunity to consolidate his strength and expand his influence. Third, and most importantly, Yang Qindong would never allow the other races to have any ideas about the Han people and cause any destruction. Back then, Kuang Yi and Wang Zue, the two ministers of the 6 ministries, wrote to him, saying that he had saved Ingzong's life, and that he would have more room to develop in Nanjing than in the capital. The environment would also be better. But Yang Qindong still refused. That was because there was a strong enemy in the capital, while Nanjing was very safe. Chapter 171. It couldn't be said that Yang Qindong had appeared for the sake of war, but he had indeed appeared for the sake of the Han's rise to power. Since there were people who wanted to harm the Han, why couldn't he teach them a lesson? Presumably after this battle, Zhu Qiu would owe him a big favor. This would only be beneficial to his future plans. Alright, Marquis knows about this matter. How about this? Go back and tell Su Yozhen to recommend Marquis to lead the army tomorrow morning. Yang Qindong analyzed the situation and felt that the time was right. It was time to step forward, so he informed his subordinates of his decision. Yes. The staff member of the security bureau quickly left after receiving a confirmation. Yang Qindong quickly returned to the spacious carriage. As soon as he entered, the women began to chatter incessantly. Knowing that there were some things that couldn't be hidden, Yang Qindong maintained a smile on his face as he said, "The soldiers on the front lines have been defeated. The Walla army should be arriving at the capital soon." But the women had only asked out of curiosity. Even if Yang Qindong hadn't said anything, they would have understood. After all, the idea of a male protagonist had been passed down for thousands of years. But unexpectedly, Yang Qindong didn't have any intention of hiding it from them. He really did tell them about it, but the result was so shocking. They're about to reach the capital? Then we... As a descendant of the Hu clan, Hu Yen was naturally more sensitive to political matters than the other women. You don't need to worry. With sixth brother here, no one in this world can harm you. You just need to properly stay in the Yang clan manner. Yang Qindong spoke with an incomparably resolute voice. At this moment, Yang Qindong was so confident that the four women were mesmerized and unable to extricate themselves. Sensing that the four women weren't panicking anymore, Yang Qindong smiled and said, "All right, let's do what we need to do now. The immortal abode and realm beyond heaven need to operate normally to calm the people. If possible, if there's a property market nearby that's willing to sell at a suitable price, we can buy it. It's also time to expand our operations." To ordinary people, war was naturally a disaster. But to some people it was filled with countless business opportunities. Everything depended on your position, what kind of information you could obtain, and what kind of authority you held. Yang Qindong didn't lack any of these three things. If he couldn't maximize his benefits in this situation, then all his previous preparations and plans would be meaningless. Bye. This was the first order Yang Qindong gave to Hu Yen and the others, as well as the first mission of his wives. For the sake of making the best of the situation, a total of 5 million taels of silver had been moved out of the cellar of the Yang clan manor. This was all prepared by Yang Qindong before the construction of the Earthwood fortress. It was all for the sake of dealing with the current situation. Tell Ling Song to pick up the pace. Be more daring. We have to reach the capital within 5 days. Yang Qindong looked at Leng Feng and his brothers, who were carrying so much silver that their hands were about to go limp. Even though he was giving orders to Tiger's Mane, he was thinking of another problem. If moving silver was so troublesome, it seemed like it was time to consider the issue of banknotes. The appearance of banknotes was a huge step forward in the history of currency. Some people in the world of currency believed that the origin of banknotes in China could be traced back to the white deer skin coin of Emperor Wu's time and the flying money of the Tang dynasty. The flying money was actually just a currency exchange business. It did not enter into circulation and did not function as a currency, so it was not a true banknote. The banknotes of Sichuan and Qingdu during the Northern Song dynasty were the beginning of the true banknotes. But for various reasons the system was not perfect, and in the end it was not developed on a large scale. In the Yuan dynasty and Ming dynasty, although the banknote system was further improved, it was still difficult for it to be accepted by the people. At the end of the Qing dynasty, the Qing dynasty's economy was in trouble, and the treasury was empty. In order to raise money for the military, they had to change their original plan of not printing banknotes for 200 years. In the third year of Xianfeng 1853, the first banknote of the Ministry of Revenue was printed. This time the banknotes of the Ministry of Revenue were divided into 5 types of silver: 1 tael, 3 taels, 5 taels, 10 taels and 50 taels. In the middle of the banknotes were written in both Manchu and Chinese characters, Ministry of Revenue official banknote. It was from then on that banknotes became one of the paper currencies that could be circulated. Although the Ming dynasty also had official banknotes, most of them were internal transactions between officials. Ordinary people and even merchants rarely participated in them. The imperfection of the system meant that these banknotes could be turned into waste paper at any time. Who would dare to use silver to exchange for them? Not to mention other people, but even Yang Qindong himself did not trust the Ming dynasty government. This government was made up of officials, and the speed at which it changed was so fast that it made one's eyes blur. Who would dare to take out all of their wealth to exchange for banknotes? Perhaps the moment one exchanged for it, the Genie guards and the East faction guards would come to raid one's home. For example, Yang Qindong's 5 million taels of silver had never been exposed. He believed that if he really trusted the great Ming dynasty, Wang Zhen would have already made a move on him and would not have waited until it had developed to such a scale. It was because the banknote system was not recognized by many that Yang Qindong wanted to do something about it. In his later life he had seen the power of the state-owned banks, so he could naturally see the huge benefits involved. As for the risks, with the Xianxia's new army as his backing, he was not afraid of others plotting against him. Perhaps he was still thinking that if others had such thoughts he would have a good reason to deal with them. While Yang Qindong was still thinking about his grand plans, the capital was already in chaos. As the officials returned home from the court, the news of the Ming dynasty's defeat spread like wildfire. For a time all sorts of things were said, and in a state of panic, a small number of people left the capital and headed south. Although there were not many of them, most of them were merchants. They had all left in fear after hearing that the Ming dynasty's army was defeated and that the Walla was about to arrive at the capital. When these people left, most of them took with them a large amount of cash from their homes. Perhaps it was said that merchants valued profits, and patriotism was not as reliable as profits? The departure of a portion of merchants caused the already tense atmosphere in the capital to become even more chaotic. Even some of the common people began to pack up. After 2 consecutive defeats and the loss of the Ming dynasty's elites, they did not have much confidence that they could defeat the Walla. If they did not leave, they would most likely meet with misfortune. Not to mention, in the afternoon of that day, there was a rumor that the Walla cavalry drank human blood and ate human flesh to survive. Once captured, the women would naturally be humiliated, and the men and children would become food in their mouths. This news was far more effective than people saying that the Walla cavalry was brave and good in battle. The direct result was that a large number of people gathered at the city gate. If it was not for the city gate being closed at the time, who knew how many people would have left? The so-called news of the Walla eating humans was naturally released by the Security Bureau in order to attract big hoodlums and fish in troubled waters. However, this action seemed to be a little too big. At that time, the common people were not well informed and their knowledge was limited. Thus, they really believed the rumors, and in a short period of time, a wave of people left the city. The situation at the city gate quickly spread to the palace and into the ears of the acting patriarch Zhou Xian. When he heard that his people were so panicked, the new emperor was scared out of his wits. If the capital became an empty city, how could it resist the Walla army? Could it be that he, the new emperor, was going to abandon the city and flee? If that was the case, where could he go? Zhou Xian of the Ying sect was probably waiting for him to make a fool of himself. Go and find out who spread the rumors. After we catch them, we will cut them into pieces. Zhou Qiu's eyes seemed to spit fire as he spoke. Your Majesty, the embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern Depot will naturally investigate this matter. However, what is more important is how to pacify the people in the city. If these people really do leave the capital, then Jin Ying, who had been urgently summoned, did not elaborate on what would happen. But one could imagine that if the capital became empty, the emperor would truly be a loner. In that case, this emperor would have undoubtedly failed. No, we can't let them leave. Beloved subject, do you have a good plan? Zhou Qiu naturally understood the severity of the situation if things continued to develop like this, so he urgently asked Jin Ying if he had any good ideas. Your Majesty, this subject is incompetent and does not have a better plan for now. However, in order to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control, this subject suggests that we temporarily close the city gates and allow only small towns to enter and exit. Moreover, we must conduct inspections and forbid the common people from taking money out of the city. In this way, the family property will naturally remain here and will not leave. As for how to deal with the Wallace soldiers, Your Majesty must preside over tomorrow's morning court and discuss with the other officials a plan. Jin Ying had never seen anything like this before. Although he had followed several emperors and seen their ability to govern, this was mostly a power struggle between the emperor and the court officials. This was the first time he had ever seen an army pressing down on the capital. Zhou Qiu was somewhat panicked, but he felt that Jin Ying's words were somewhat reasonable. He immediately agreed and placed all his hopes on tomorrow's morning court. After a sleepless night, the morning court began as scheduled. At the same time, the main gates of the capital were opened to side gates in the name of preventing Walla spies from sneaking in. Strict inspections were also carried out, and if anyone was found to be leaving the capital with large amounts of money, they would be arrested on the spot for all sorts of unnecessary crimes. Although this method was somewhat forceful, it truly did prevent the common people from leaving the capital. Chapter 172. It was under such a tense atmosphere that Yang Qindong entered the capital from the Yang family manor. It was the day of the return trip. He came to the Hu mansion with his new wife Hu Yen to visit his relatives. The inspection for leaving the city was very strict, but for entering the city, it was much more relaxed. This point was tantamount to slapping himself in the face, proving how ridiculous the so-called catching spies was. Since Yang Qindong became Marquis, the lineup when he went out had become much larger. It was the same this time. The number of servants and guards alone had reached 30, and there were nearly 100 strong men and maids carrying boxes. From this point of view, Yang Qindong had already violated the rules. According to the law of the Great Ming Dynasty, a marquis could only take 8 attendants at most when he went out, but he had 30 guards. Even if he took more than 100 strong men and maids with him, the team was indeed too large. If it was in normal times, those imperial censors would probably impeach him again. But now the capital was in danger. Who was in the mood to worry about this? Of course, even in peacetime, Yang Qindong would not change what he had decided. He came to create rules, not to follow them. Besides, in order to marry Hu Yan, Yang Qindong had given Hu family at least 2 million things, which had once shocked the capital. But in the end, those were filial gifts from Yang Qindong, but this time Hu Yan was filial to her parents. The meaning was naturally different. Of course, Hu Yan would feel proud and happy that so many good things were given to her family. But after all, she was already a member of the Yang family. Out of consideration for her husband, she still said the words of refusal. In this regard, Yang Qindong reached out to scratch her nose and said with a smile, "Silly girl, you are my woman now. So what if I give you some things? Besides, your 6th son has nothing but a lot of money. Don't worry. After these things are given out, your 6th son will not become poor." This little joke made Hu Yan inexplicably happy, and her nose was a little sore. Although money might not be able to prove anything, wouldn't taking care of his face and being forthright and magnanimous prove his importance? Thinking of this, she sighed that she had married the right person and chosen the right man. The vast army entered the capital. If it were any other time, such a scene would definitely attract a lot of onlookers and even a lot of discussions and gossip. At the same time, it would also garner a lot of envious gazes. But at this time, everyone was thinking about how to leave the capital to take refuge. Who would have the time to care about such trivial matters and watch such a show? Seated in the spacious and luxurious carriage, Yang Qindong would occasionally look out the window, gathering all the information in his mind and gaining a more direct understanding of the situation in the capital. Hu Yan nestled in Yang Qindong's arms. It was rare that there was no one else in the carriage, so she became somewhat unrestrained. She completely disregarded her reserved appearance and leaned her head against Yang Qindong's chest, feeling the strong and powerful heartbeat with a face full of happiness. When the carriage stopped in front of the Hu estate and Hu Yan got off, her face was still flushed with happiness. When she saw her mother waiting in the hall, she excitedly ran over. In the imperial court, the atmosphere today was exceptionally tense. In the past, in order to express his majesty, the emperor would first listen to the memorials of his subordinates, and then give a few suggestions when he had an idea, demonstrating his supreme authority. But today, before the officials could speak, even after they had just knelt down and chanted "Long live the emperor," he asked anxiously, "Dear officials, do you have any ideas about the candidate to lead the army and the strategy to retreat the enemy? Do you all have any ideas?" Thus the entire court fell silent. If one were to say that a great Confucian scholar who knew the 4 books and 5 classics, he could naturally name many people. But when it came to driving back the enemy and leading the army, how could it be so easy? Speaking of which, it had been a long time since there had been a major foreign war. Even if there were some wars, they were only small skirmishes or internal conflicts. For those kinds of battles, as long as the enemy was pressured, there was no need for any techniques. But this time, facing the elite cavalry of Walla who had repeatedly defeated them, hundreds of thousands of troops were thrown in twice. And the result was a great defeat, which led to a situation where there was a shortage of soldiers. So how could they resist the enemy? Not to mention that recommending a candidate to be an official and a general were 2 completely different things. When recommending an official, even if the other party was not qualified, they could casually find a reason and say that they did not know the official very well to get away with it. At most, they could bribe the officials and use some money, and the matter would be resolved as a small matter. But recommending a general to fight against the powerful army of Walla, if they did not do well, they would lose their heads, and even worse, the recommender would also be punished. So who would do such a recommendation easily? On one hand, they did not want to cause trouble, but more importantly, They did not have a suitable candidate in mind. In their eyes, the Tile army that even Ingzong himself could not defeat was already an undefeatable army, an army that no one could defeat. The officials were all mute and did not make a sound. This made the emperor anxious and Zhu Qiu angry. What? You don't even have a suitable candidate? You claim to be the pillars of the country, and according to you, you have everything in the world in your hands and you are omnipotent, but now is it so difficult to recommend a person to lead the army? If that's the case, are you lying to me? In anger, Zhu Qiu wanted to label the officials as deceiving the emperor. In this way, even if he used this reason to kill a few officials, the others would not be able to say anything. Feeling the anger of the emperor, the officials were panicking, and at the same time they looked at each other and then quickly transitioned in their minds to a candidate to lead the army. But no matter how hard they thought, it was difficult to find a suitable person. What? Seeing that the officials still did not say a word, in anger, Zhu Qiu decided to kill a few people as a sacrifice to the flag. Some people were like this: if they were not forced to this point, they would not know how powerful they were. Just as Zhu Qian's gaze swept over and was thinking about who to kill to make an example, someone in the crowd suddenly said, "Emperor, this official has a candidate to recommend." Who are you recommending? Come forward. Zhu Qiu, who was about to explode, suddenly saw hope and was naturally very happy. His eyes searched and his voice became very anxious. As you wish. The newly appointed vice minister of Taichung Temple, Zhou Xian, who had received the emperor's order, stepped forward with a face full of confidence. The officials were also curious about who stepped forward at this time, but when they saw that it was Zhou Xian who was in charge of the sacrifice, they all showed a puzzled expression. This person used to be an imperial censor, although he had impeached some people and had a slight reputation, but in the end he was not a ranked official, and it was difficult for him to enter the eyes of others. If it were not for the two emperors this time, it would be impossible for him to be promoted from a 6th-rank official to a 4th-rank vice minister of Taichung Temple. Yesterday this person had been in the limelight once, and at that time his colleagues had a whole new level of respect for him. They did not expect that he would speak again today. Could it be that he really had a suitable candidate in mind to lead the army? Could it be that he was really a person with a military strategy? Under the gaze of the officials, under the eager eyes of the emperor, Zhou Xian, who was holding the ceremonial tablet, stepped forward with a face full of confidence, knelt and said, "This official recommends a person he has fought with the Walla cavalry and has not been defeated and retreated unscathed. With him, the so-called small foreign tribes are not a problem, and can be swept away like a spider web in a room." Zhou Xian's flattery made the ministers in the imperial court even more surprised. Who had fought with the Walla army and not been defeated? Even Shi Hing, who was given the title of Taidu and Wuqing Count, was also defeated. Could it be that there was really a general more powerful than this person? If it was true, why hadn't they heard of it? The officials were puzzled, but the Emperor Zhu Qiu did not think much about it. Right now he was anxious to find a way to solve the problem as long as he could force the enemy to retreat. As for where he came from and what his current position was, he did not care about it. Good, my great Ming is really full of talents, but I don't know the name of this person. Where is he now? What is his official position? Zhu Qiu asked anxiously, but Zhou Xian answered indifferently, replying to the emperor, "This person is now in the capital, Yang Qindong, the loyal marquis." Zhu Shaoqing, be careful with your words. Among the officials, someone quickly made a reproachful attitude. This person was an important official in the court, the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao. Yang Qindong married his granddaughter and the two families had a very close relationship. Now that someone recommended his grandson-in-law to lead the army to war, of course he would be unhappy. This was war and people would die not doing business. At worst it would just be a loss of money. That's right, Zhu Shaoqing, don't be too impatient. This is leading the army to war, a matter of national importance, not a place to settle personal grudges. Hu Zhangning also stood in the court. In order to solve the crisis, Zhu Qiu had specially ordered all the 5th-rank officials in the capital to come to court. As the imperial guardian of the embroidered uniform guard, he naturally had the qualifications to stand here. He was already Yang Qindong's father-in-law, so he naturally could not ignore his son-in-law's matters. His words directly pointed out that there was a problem with Zhou Xian's motives. In fact, most people in the court remembered that when Su Yozhen was still an imperial censor, he had once impeached Yang Qindong for going to the red light district. After that, although Yang Qindong was unharmed, he was promoted. With this precedent as an example, it was no wonder that Hu Zhongning would think this way and even dare to point it out in front of the court. Su Yozhen, who was being rebuked by both Hu Shao and Hu Zhongning, did not panic in the slightest. On the contrary, he maintained a slight smile and said, "Yes, when this official was an imperial censor, I truly did impeach the loyal marquis, but that was only out of duty, not because of personal grudges. Now this official is recommending the loyal marquis both out of duty and to repay the emperor's kindness in recognizing my worth. Moreover, this official can take responsibility for his words. If the loyal marquis is unable to stop the enemy outside the capital, this official is willing to take full responsibility." Chapter 173. Take full responsibility. When he said this, the entire court was in an uproar. This was no longer a recommendation but a bet on his own life. If he didn't have enough confidence, how would he dare to do such a thing? For a moment, all the officials looked at each other. No one dared to doubt whether Su Yozhen had bad motives. After all, if you wanted to harm your enemy or opponent, there were many ways. But he wouldn't choose this kind of responsible statement. Wasn't that taking the initiative to jump into a sinking ship and seeking his own death? Su Yozhen's words made all the officials speechless. There was a feeling of speechlessness and they didn't know what to say. Zhu Qiu, who saw all of this, was very happy in his heart. Regardless of whether Yang Qindong was suitable to lead the army or not, at least someone had recommended a candidate. This was a good sign. He looked at Su Yozhen with a praising gaze and said, "Good Minister Su is loyal to the country, your heart is praiseworthy. But I don't know how you are so sure that the Marquis of Loyalty can take on this heavy responsibility. Your Majesty, please allow this official to report." After receiving Yang Qindong's reply yesterday, he also received a lot of information from the Security Bureau. After sorting it out, he also thought about what to say for half a night. Now that it was time to show off, he immediately boasted in front of Dai Zong and all the officials. From Su Yozhen's mouth, everyone knew that Yang Qindong saved Ingzong, Kuang Yi, Wang Zhua and the other 9 officials. Only then did they know that the Marquis of Loyalty didn't rely on luck, but a mercenary army with a high price. They were using the latest firearms, which were not difficult to fire continuously. Moreover, they were extremely accurate. It was because of this army of 100 people that they were able to save the lives of Ingzong and the others in the chaos. This was the reason why they were given the title of Count of Loyalty and Courage. After explaining the situation in detail, Su Yozhen immediately kowtowed to the ground and vowed to Zhu Qian, "Your Majesty, this official is willing to use my life and the dozens of people in my family as a guarantee. If we can invite the Marquis of Loyalty and the mercenary army, it isn't impossible to withdraw the elite army of the Walla. This official asks for your Majesty's decree." His voice was impassioned and powerful, reverberating throughout the entire palace. Every word and sentence passed into the ears of the emperor and the officials, but at this time no one agreed. It was obvious that everyone was digesting what Su Yozhen had said and the information she had brought to them. Zhu Qiu also didn't immediately make a decision. Su Yozhen's words alone were not enough to determine if Yang Qindong really had such an ability. This was a battle to protect the capital. If he made a mistake, he would lose everything he had in his life. If he lost this battle and the capital fell to the enemy, even if he killed Yang Qindong and Su Yozhen, what use would it be? He needed to think about it carefully, so he fell into deep thought. Jin Ying, who was extremely observant, saw that Zhu Qiu hadn't spoken for a long time. She reminded him in a small voice, "Your Majesty, is it possible to withdraw from court first and discuss this matter at court tomorrow morning?" "Oh, let's end the court session." Zhu Qiu nodded mechanically. Immediately, a drake-like voice rang out, "Court dismissed." The Hu estate. Yang Qindong had been sitting in the main hall, accompanied by the chief steward of the Hu estate. When Hu Shao and Hu Zhongning returned, the 3 of them greeted each other. "Everyone else is dismissed." Hu Shao glanced at the steward and Tiger's Mane, who had been standing by Yang Qindong's side like a javelin. The steward withdrew. Tiger's Mane also withdrew after receiving a signal from Yang Qindong. When only the three of them were left in the room, Hu Shao took the initiative to speak. "Loyal Marquis, do you know that someone recommended you to lead the army in the battle against the Walla?" Hu Shao asked directly, his sharp gaze piercing straight into Yang Chendong's heart. It was unimaginable that an old man in his 70s had so much experience in dealing with the world and pleasing countless people. Let alone a young man who wasn't even 20 years old. Such a gaze would make even an old official of the same court panic. Even Hu Zhongning, who was seated next to Hu Shao, felt a wave of pressure wash over him. However, towards this, Yang Chendong was neither anxious nor slow, and his expression was incomparably indifferent. It was as if these words were not directed at him. "Thank you for your concern, old master. Chendong is truly guilty." Calling Hu Shao old master was not a common title at the time. This form of address caused Hu Zhao's expression to freeze. His sharp gaze and stern expression seemed to have faded a lot at this moment. Hu Zhao's aura was no longer overbearing. Yang Chendong spread out his hands and spoke with a sincere expression. "Old master, father-in-law has something to ask, so I naturally do not dare to hide it. Su Yozhen's intentions are my intentions." "What do you mean?" Yang Chendong's reply caused Hu Zhongning's expression to stiffen. He did not quite understand. On the other hand, his father Hu Shao quickly understood everything. His gaze was filled with obvious surprise. "Su Yozhen is one of your people? When did this happen? Has she ever impeached you before?" "She has been one of my people since before the impeachment." Yang Chendong spoke extremely calmly, as if he was talking about something insignificant. There was not the slightest hint of pride. Controlling a rank 4 official of the imperial court was something to be proud of. However, no matter how one looked at it, he did not seem to care at all. It was as if everything was right and proper. This. Hu Zhongning finally understood. Of course, his face was filled with shock. Hu Dan was also shocked by these words. However, he had been in the imperial court for so many years after all. He quickly understood the crux of the matter. He was also incomparably shocked, but he did not show it on his face. Just by looking at his ability to maintain his composure, it was unknown how much better he was than his son. "So that's how it is. It seems that this old man has worried too much. But you arranged for Su Yozhen to do this? How confident are you?" Hu Shao knew that Yang Chendong was playing a very big game of chess, but he did not know exactly what he was going to do. He only knew that this grandson-in-law of his was filled with confidence. "I don't dare to hide it from old master. I am 100% confident," Yang Chendong respectfully replied while inwardly praising Hu Zhao's reaction and judgment. 100%? This answer also startled Hu Shao. His eyes lit up as if he was going to re-evaluate Yang Chendong at this moment. Since ancient times, no one had dared to say that they were 100% confident in war. Even if they knew that victory was certain, they would only say that they were 99% confident. This was all because reality was unpredictable and constantly changing. This was especially true when it came to war. Often, if one did not consider everything thoroughly, it could change the entire situation. Who dared to say that they were 100% confident? Yang Chendong was so sure without the slightest bit of impetuousness. It didn't seem like he was speaking without thinking. Didn't that mean that he really had thought about it long ago and was prepared long ago? But what was he relying on? "I heard that you hired an army of 100 people. Those people have firearms that our great Ming dynasty does not have. With them you were able to successfully rescue Zhong. Is this true?" Hu Shao began to wonder where Yang Chendong's confidence came from. The first thing he asked was what Su Yozhen said. "It is true." Yang Chendong replied in a resolute tone. "I did hire an army. They also have firearms that are many times more advanced than our great Ming dynasty. With them they have no problem dealing with the Walla cavalry." But what?" Hu Zhongning, who was listening intently, asked anxiously. "It's just that the cost of hiring them is too high. Every time they complete a mission it costs 10,000 taels per person. Moreover, it costs at least 1,000,000 taels per person. In other words, even if you only hire one person, you have to pay 1,000,000 taels of silver to hire them. So it's really a waste of money." Yang Chendong said while shaking his head, indicating that he could not bear the burden. "So much?" Hu Zhongning was also shocked by the high cost. 100 people cost 1,000,000 taels of silver. Didn't that mean that the money needed to hire 100 people could support an army of a few 100,000 people at the border for a year? Yes, it's that much. Moreover, it's impossible to negotiate the price. This is because I have done business with them before and have some credibility. If it were someone else, I'm afraid that even if they paid, they would not be able to hire them. Yang Qindong lowered his head and let out a long sigh. His expression showed that he could not bear the burden anymore. Admitting that Su Yozhen was one of his people was the sincerity that Yang Qindong showed to the Hu clan. Since they were all relatives, it would not be good to hide some things. If people knew about it in the future, how would they meet each other? But even if they were relatives, there were some things that could be said and some things that could not be said. For example, the mercenary army was originally his own army. He did not need to spend any money at all and they would completely obey his orders. Yang Qindong would not tell Hu Xiao about this. Not only that, but he also had to pretend that it was very difficult. Only in this way would the old man speak up for him at the crucial moment. It could also be said that Yang Qindong was willing to say so much to Hu Xiao because he wanted to use his mouth to persuade Zhu Qiyu and let him know that only he had the strength to reverse the situation. Only in this way could the other party come to him and he could ask for an exorbitant price. When Yang Qindong did things, he had always done things step by step. Even people like Hu Xiao would often inadvertently be used by him. By the time he reacted, he would often not know whether to laugh or cry. At lunchtime, the atmosphere seemed to have returned to normal, but Hu Ming and Hu Zhongning both seemed to have a lot on their minds. Yang Qindong, on the other hand, kept sitting there with a modest smile, which made Hu Yen glare at him fiercely, but then her eyes became incomparably warm. Hu Yen did not know what Yang Qindong said to her grandfather and father, but she was sure of one thing, and that was that he would definitely not harm her family. Chapter 174. This time Hu Yen brought back so many good things. Compared to the other married sisters, her face was full of glory, and she received many envious gazes from the crowd. And all of this was brought to her by Yang Qindong. How could she be dissatisfied? After a seemingly quiet lunch, Hu Yen bid farewell to her parents and family and left the Hu estate with Yang Qindong. After watching them leave, Hu Zhongning asked eagerly, "Father, can I send someone to investigate him?" The governor of the Brocade Guard originally had the power to investigate cases. This time he planned to use his power to understand his son-in-law. "You can't. Zhongning, remember this. Although he is not as old as you, he is meticulous, far-sighted and far-sighted. Even I can't compare to him. If you want to do anything, you won't be able to hide from him. If you do this, it will only hurt the relationship between the two of you. It is meaningless." Hu Chang shook his head and gave a high evaluation of Yang Qindong. Hu Zhongning didn't expect his father to think so highly of Yang Qindong. Although he was a little unconvinced, he was used to listening to his father's orders for a long time. This made him immediately dispel the idea of doing anything. "Okay, I won't do anything. But father, how will I explain this to the emperor in the morning court tomorrow?" Father will have to think about it carefully. The news came too suddenly. It was so sudden that Hu Chang couldn't completely digest it, let alone think of a way to deal with it. Imperial Palace. When Zhu Qiyu saw Jin Ying appear in front of him, he immediately ignored his status as the emperor and got up. He asked anxiously, "How is it? Did you find out anything?" Replying to your majesty, this subject has sent out a lot of spies and obtained proof that the loyal marquis really has a very elite army by his side. In order to avoid alerting the enemy and to avoid causing a misunderstanding between the two sides, our people did not come into close contact with them and did not see what the new firearms looked like. However, there is one thing that can be confirmed, and that is the existence of new firearms. This has been confirmed through some of the things that have happened. Jin Ying wiped the sweat from his forehead as he answered Zhu Qiyu's question. He gave off the feeling that he had worked very hard to obtain this information in such a short time. But in reality he had already experienced the new firearms before, so he naturally knew that everything was true. Hearing that there was indeed a new type of firearm, Zhu Qiyu saw a glimmer of hope. "That's impossible. What if we make it ourselves? If it's really as powerful as you say with such firearms, why should we be afraid of others?" Human nature was greedy. After knowing the benefits of the new firearms, Zhu Qiyu started to have ideas about it. Perhaps it was because of his identity as the emperor that he had the misconception that everything under the heavens belonged to the emperor, and that all the good things under the heavens should belong to him. Jin Ying had thought of this before and she had paid a heavy price for it. She naturally knew that this path would not work. Faced with Zhu Qiu's wishful thinking, she could only say, "Your Majesty, I'm afraid this won't be easy." "What do you mean?" Hearing that the matter was impossible, displeasure appeared on Zhu Qiu's face. Jin Ying was stared at by that stern gaze and her entire body tensed. She knew that if she did not explain the matter clearly, she was afraid that the emperor would hold a grudge against her. If she was not careful, he might even replace her and find someone more obedient to take power. Eunuchs were close officials of the emperor. Naturally, they enjoyed the benefits of being in a favorable position. This was also the main reason why they could become powerful and even have real power. At the same time, eunuchs relied on the emperor's favor. Once they lost this support, they were nothing. They would be chewed up by those officials in an instant and not even a scrap of bone would be left. Jin Ying was well aware of the reasoning behind this. How could she dare to make Zhu Qiu unhappy? Seeing the emperor's dissatisfied expression, she hurriedly explained, "Your Majesty, think about it. Those mercenaries saved Ying Zong's life on the battlefield. How could he not see the value of these people? However, they were not used by him. This shows that this matter is difficult to accomplish. As for how the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage used to convince those people, I'm afraid that we will need to investigate to find out." Jin Ying had no choice but to bring up Ying Zong. Perhaps in the eyes of this new emperor, only his former imperial brother could give him some pressure. As expected, hearing Jin Ying's explanation, Zhu Qiu's expression became much more normal. Something that even his imperial brother could not do, it seemed normal that he could not do it. The new firearms were not easy to obtain, and the mercenaries would definitely not listen to him. Zhu Qiu had no choice but to set his sights on Yang Chendong. He had long heard of this gifted scholar, Yang Chendong, who he had even conferred the title of the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage, attracted Zhu Qiu's attention. "Beloved official, what do you think of the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage?" Hearing the emperor's thoughts change so quickly, Jin Ying was startled at first but quickly recovered. "Your Majesty, the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage is very talented. He also has the ability to earn money. He is a rare talent. However, how is his ability to command troops? This subject does not know." Jin Ying had already encountered Yang Chendong more than once. Although the two of them hadn't interacted much, he had never profited from him. If possible, he really didn't want to provoke this kind of person. However, since the emperor had asked, he still had to answer truthfully. "That's right. This person's ability to earn money is very strong. Regardless of whether it is in the immortal abode or in the realm beyond heaven, it is said that he is an existence who earns large sums of money every day. Even that unremarkable Yang Bao, I heard that he also earns quite a bit of money. This kind of person is a talent and should be used by us." Zhu Qiu longed for someone with the ability to help him. When he thought back to today's morning court when all the officials had been so helpless, he thought that perhaps if Yang Chendong had been present, the situation wouldn't have been so awkward. Hearing that Zhu Qiu wanted to put Yang Chendong in an important position, Jin Ying lightly shook his head. "Your Majesty, this subject said before that the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage is very capable of earning money. Thus, rather than calling him an official or a scholar, it would be better to call him a merchant. However, all merchants value profit over loyalty. No matter. It's good that he has a request. I'm afraid that a person has no desires. That way we won't feel at ease using him. How about this, beloved official? Immediately go see the Marquis of Loyalty and ask him about the matter of asking him to go to war. If he agrees, we will give him command of the army." Zhu Qiu was truly decisive. He didn't doubt those he used and didn't use those he doubted. In this aspect he was slightly better than Zhu Qian from Ying Zong. At the very least he wasn't so jealous. Since the emperor had given the order, Jin Ying knew that it was useless to say anything else. He immediately nodded in agreement. This subject obeys. Soon after, just as Yang Chendong and Hu Yen returned to the Yang clan manor from the capital, Jin Ying arrived. The current Jin Ying was on the same level as Wang Zhen. His power was so great that few people could compare to him. His arrival naturally attracted Yang Chendong's personal welcome. Welcoming Jin Ying was simply giving him face. As the saying went, if you're good, I'm good, everyone is good. Until he had enough soldiers to peacefully take over the great Ming dynasty, Yang Chendong didn't want to put on an aggressive front unless it was necessary. Yang Chendong and Jin Ying were seated in the guest and host seats in a side hall. This had almost become a habit of Yang Chendong's. As long as it was a eunuch or a lowly person, no matter how much power they had, he would not receive them in the main hall. Those who could be received in the main hall were all people that Yang Chendong valued and admired. Jin Ying naturally didn't know about this habit of Yang Chendong's. If he did, he would probably be burning with rage right now. Not only did he not know, but he also had a request to make. Upon seeing Yang Chendong, Jin Ying became extremely courteous, maintaining a smile on his face. This one was too busy the last 2 days and was unable to attend the wedding of the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage. I am truly sorry. You're too kind. Eunuch Jin is accompanying His Majesty. How important is that? Marquis marrying a wife is just a small matter. Yang Chendong chuckled, appearing completely unconcerned. In truth, he hadn't even asked Jin Ying for advice on his wedding day. There were times when Yang Chendong would accommodate others for the sake of the greater good. For example, on a wedding day like this, he truly didn't want to see someone who was neither male nor female appear in front of him. Even some of his colleagues in the brocade guard who were true men had come uninvited. The only ones who had truly been invited were the court officials. Jin Ying clearly knew this, but he had purposely raised this question to express his dissatisfaction. He also wanted to use this as a pretext to suppress Yang Chendong and have him take control of the conversation. Unexpectedly, Yang Chendong didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt. He used the excuse that marrying a wife was a small matter to cover it up. He didn't even say the most basic polite words. This little test made Jin Ying understand that the following negotiations wouldn't be too smooth. At the same time, he became more careful. The conversation changed from probing to straightforward. Marquis of Loyalty and Courage, you must already know about what happened at the morning court today. Someone has recommended you to lead the army against the Walla and raise the prestige of our country. Jin Ying was expressing that he understood his situation. He had just made a trip to Minister Hu's residence and must have received news of such an important matter. Now please state your position. Jin Ying didn't have any intention of beating around the bush. When Yang Chendong heard this, he smiled. This was also good. He didn't have to probe too much and could save a lot of time. Alright, since Eunuch Jin's words are so straightforward, then Marquis will also state his position here. It's just a mere Walla army. To be honest, Marquis doesn't really care about them. I won't hide it from Eunuch Jin. Marquis has already contacted the overseas mercenary headquarters. The army they've sent to support our great Ming should be here soon. Chapter 175. What? You've already contacted them in advance? When Jin Ying heard this news, her expression was one of extreme shock. Yes. As the ancients say, if one does not consider the future, one will have immediate worries. After witnessing the ferocity of the Walla cavalry outside the Timu castle, this Marquis already knew that it would be difficult for our great Ming Empire's army to be their opponent. Thus, he prepared for a rainy day and sent out a signal to send out reinforcements. What? Is Eunuch Jin blaming Marquis for acting on his own? There was a faint smile in Yang Chendong's eyes as he stared at Jin Ying. It was as if he wanted to see through his inner thoughts. No, how could that be? For some reason, Jin Ying felt a sense of pressure. He had only felt this kind of pressure not long after entering the palace, when he was serving Zhu Di. It's fine as long as you don't. In truth, it's nothing much. I presume that someone of Eunuch Jin's abilities already knows how much it costs to hire these foreign mercenaries with advanced firearms. It's naturally best if the imperial court can take out this money. Everything will be fine and the capital will have no more worries. But if there's some difficulty, Marquis can pay for it himself. But if that's the case, they probably won't participate in the operation against the Walla army. After all, it won't cost much to have them protect me and my property from leaving the capital. Marquis can still afford it. But if they go into battle, the cost is truly not something Marquis can afford. Yang Chendong, who had always been so proud of his wealth that he didn't know how to spend it, was now crying about how poor he was. Jin Ying couldn't help but grimace at these words. This was a clear threat. If Dai Zong was unable to fork out enough money for the military expenditure, Yang Chendong would bring his men and leave the capital. Perhaps he would directly seek refuge with Zhou Xian, who was currently settling down in Nanjing. If this was the case, Jining didn't even dare to imagine what sort of chain reaction it would set off. He would not forget that it was precisely because of the opening of the immortal abode and heaven beyond heaven that the hearts of the people were at ease and many officials were willing to stay in the capital. Then if he left now, would those officials who swayed according to the wind also leave with him? If the people wanted to leave, the officials would have to go with them, and the capital would truly be nothing more than an empty shell. At that time, before Walla's army could even arrive, the capital would have already fallen into chaos. This duke knows about this matter. However, this matter is of great importance. This duke still needs to report back to the emperor to make a decision. Seeing Yang Chendong draw the line, Jining knew that the initiative had changed hands. Unless she didn't want to rely on this person's strength to help, she could only fulfill the conditions to protect herself. After Jining finished speaking, she stood up and looked like she was about to leave. Eunuch Jin, please wait. Marquis hasn't finished speaking yet. The emperor and the imperial court would provide the military necessities, and Marquis would only be a middleman, which would not benefit him in any way. As the saying goes, one should not get up early when one is powerless. Here is one of Marquis' personal conditions. Oh, it's all written on this paper. I'll have to trouble Eunuch Jin to bring it back for His Majesty to see. Marquis will be waiting here for your good news. Yang Chendong was beaming with joy and contentment. At this moment, Yang Chendong was beaming with joy as he handed a piece of white paper filled with words to Jining. He was openly asking the imperial court for benefits from the emperor. How could this be the conduct of a law-abiding official? Normally, Jining would have ridiculed him, and then a large group of embroidered uniform guards and Eastern Depot agents would surround this place and arrest him. But now he had a favor to ask. Although he was angry, he could only forcefully suppress his dissatisfaction. He even forced a smile and said, "All right, I will report the loyal Marquis' intentions to the emperor. Don't worry." Jining reached out and took the paper full of words. Then he strode away. He was really afraid of Yang Chendong. He was afraid that if he left at night, Yang Chendong would say something that would embarrass him. Seeing Jinying's back gradually disappear, Tiger's Mane, who had been standing guard beside Yang Chendong in the side hall, took half a step forward and said, "Young master, are we really going to help Dai Zhou? Why don't we take advantage of this opportunity to watch him perish? That way, when we make a move at the last moment, won't we be able to reap the benefits?" Foolish. Yang Chendong, who had been smiling, suddenly had a cold expression. He looked at Tiger's Mane and said, "Have you forgotten what this young master said before? We're all Han people, so how can we protect the interests of the Han people and let them live better? That's what we need to do and consider. As for anything that harms the interests and lives of the common people, we must not do anything, understand?" Yang Chendong was suddenly angry, which gave Tiger's Mane a fright. He immediately half knelt on the ground and said, "Young master, I was wrong. You are the director of the Security Bureau? When you have nothing to do, you should analyze the situation properly. In the future there will be many uses for you. If your ability proves that you can't keep up, then it's time for us master and servant to part ways." Yang Chendong sighed softly and said with a tone of disappointment. When he heard that he had to leave Yang Chendong because of this, Tiger's Mane was really frightened. His expression was blank and he said in fear, "Young master, don't worry. Tiger's Mane will definitely study hard and won't make such a mistake again." While Yang Chendong was teaching Tiger's Mane a lesson in the carriage, Jining had already opened the paper that Yang Chendong handed to her. When she saw the requirements written on it, she punched the window frame of the carriage and said angrily, "Loyal Marquis, you are really pushing your luck. Loyal Marquis, you are going too far." In the palace, after Zhu Qiu saw the piece of paper sent by Jining, his expression changed unpredictably. In the end, he roared in anger. On the paper, Yang Chendong actually asked to open a bank of the Yang family, a business to deposit money. In other words, he wanted to build a private bank, a bank recognized by the great Ming dynasty. Money and soldiers had always been synonymous with ruling a country. Often when you had these 2 points, it was equivalent to having the foundation to establish a new power or even a new country. Yang Chendong's request for Zhu Qian to agree to open a bank was equivalent to taking food from a lion's mouth. No wonder he was so angry. "No, I absolutely cannot agree to it." Zhu Qiu threw the paper in her hand to the ground, looking angry. Jin Ying bent down to pick it up and carefully came to Zhu Qiu's side. Your Majesty, please calm down. For the sake of your health, don't be so angry. How can I not be angry? This Yang Qindong clearly wants to loot a burning house. Does he really think that without him we won't be able to defeat the Walla? At worst, I will personally lead the army into battle. Zhu Qiu was so angry that he was almost roaring. It was obvious how angry he was at this moment. When Zhu Qiu mentioned leading the army into battle, Jin Ying somehow thought of Wang Zhen's death in the chaos of the army. She couldn't help but shiver. She quickly advised, Your Majesty, you can't. The Walla is coming with ferocious momentum. Our army's morale and strength are lacking. This is not the right time to fight. Not the right time? Even if I can't defeat them, do you think that Yang Qindong can defeat them? Or do you think he is stronger than me? Zhu Qiu was so angry that he lost his head. At this moment he was so angry that he questioned Jin Ying. Jin Ying's face was filled with fear and trepidation. She knelt on the ground with a thump. Your Majesty, you have a body of gold. You are the true dragon, the son of heaven. Naturally, there is no one more powerful than you in this world. However, that Yang Qindong didn't rely on himself. He hired mercenaries with new firearms with a large sum of money. Mercenaries? That's right. Since they can be hired with a large sum of money, why can't we? How about this, my beloved official? You think of a way to contact those mercenaries. We will also pay how much money Yang Qindong is willing to pay. I don't believe that they can't be used by us. Zhu Qiu was ruthless. He decided to throw money at them and compete with their strength. After the great Ming dynasty was ruled by Ren Xuanji, there was a lot of money in the national treasury. If it was a competition of wealth, how could the newly developed Yang Qindong be a match for a country? Seeing that Zhu Qiu's eyes were almost red from anger, Jin Ying knew that she couldn't refuse this matter. He immediately agreed and then quickly left the palace. He was very suspicious that if he continued to stay, he was afraid that if he was displeased he would be in big trouble. When faced with an enraged emperor, it was better to stay away from him. The embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern Depot were very efficient. They had long since begun investigating who the leader of the mercenaries was. In addition, Yang Qindong hadn't tried to hide anything. Since this force had already been exposed, they had no intention of withdrawing it. Sooner or later they would have to announce it to the world. Since that was the case, they might as well do it openly. What harm was there in letting others know? After finding out that the leader of the mercenaries was called Xiao Feng, and that he was a citizen of the great Ming dynasty, Jin Ying brought a few of her trusted subordinates to meet him in an unremarkable restaurant. Ever since the Immortal abode appeared in the city, the business of the other restaurants had been greatly reduced. In the past, some of the tycoons rarely patronized the restaurant, and the restaurant was barely hanging on despite the death of its owner. The restaurant they met in was in such a miserable state. She asked to reserve the entire restaurant and even threw down 10 taels of silver. The owner readily provided the location. By the time Xiao Feng appeared, Jin Ying had already drunk 3 cups of tea. With his current power, there were very few people who could make him wait like this. A trace of impatience appeared on his face. It wasn't until Xiao Feng appeared with 2 of Leng Feng's subordinates that a trace of joy appeared on his face. Company Commander Xiao, I'm here. Xiao Feng, who was attracted by the shouts, only casually raised his head to take a glance. He then calmly walked towards the 2nd floor. His footsteps did not have the slightest intention of speeding up because of the other people waiting. All of this was seen by the few embroidered uniform guards who had followed him. Perhaps it was because they were used to being arrogant, but when they saw someone even more arrogant than them, they were naturally unhappy. Chapter 176. He's an esteemed guest. All of you behave yourselves. Don't interrupt as you please. Sensing the changes in her subordinates' emotions, Jin Ying's expression turned cold, causing her subordinates to become much more obedient. Commander Xiao, it's an honor to meet you. After reminding her subordinates to behave, Jin Ying saw that Xiao Feng had already reached the 2nd floor and was standing in front of her. She immediately laughed heartily. Xiao Feng noticed Jin Ying's enthusiasm, but he didn't show any reaction. Instead, he nodded and arrogantly sat down on a chair in front of the table. He crossed his legs and casually scanned the surroundings. This restaurant's decor is too old-fashioned. It's too old-fashioned. What he meant was that the place Jin Ying had chosen to meet him was a little too shabby. In response, Jin Ying could only smile and say, I originally wanted to invite Commander Xiao to a banquet in the Immortal abode, but after considering that it's the loyal Marquis territory, I'm afraid it'll be inconvenient. What's so inconvenient about it? We're mercenaries. We're only doing this because we took the loyal Marquis money. Xiao Feng raised his head as if he didn't care about Yang Chendong at all. It seemed like Xiao Feng didn't put anyone in his eyes, but when he said these words his little heart was thumping. He thought in his heart, young master, you taught me to do all of this. It's not that I don't respect you. How could Jining know this? After probing a little, she discovered that Xiao Feng and Yang Chendong were only mercenaries. She was overjoyed. As expected, mercenaries only recognized money and not people. In that case, if others could hire them, wouldn't it be the same if they had money too? As she rejoiced in this information, Jin Ying leaned forward and asked in a small voice, then if our emperor is willing to pay money to hire you, would you be willing to work for him? Why not? Xiao Feng stared at Jin Ying as if this was a matter of course and there was no doubt about it. Jin Ying didn't expect to get the answer so quickly. She was overjoyed and sighed that this task wasn't difficult. She opened her mouth and said, if that's the case, how much did the loyal Marquis spend to hire you? Our emperor is willing to pay the same price. No. I'll give you an extra 10%. Your emperor is willing to invite us? But what are you doing? Xiao Feng pretended to be interested and asked. It's nothing. We just hope that you can defeat the Walla's army that threatens the safety of the capital. Our emperor has also said that once you succeed he will give you more silver. Jin Ying was afraid that Xiao Feng would be afraid of war, so she purposely emphasized on giving them more money. Tiger's Mane had previously spoken to Xiao Feng on behalf of Yang Chendong about what would happen if he met Jin Ying. He wasn't surprised at all that Jin Ying had said. Thus when he heard this he said as they had discussed, Eunuch Jin, I'm very sorry but this isn't a problem with the money. Jin Ying, who had been prepared to talk incessantly and even wondered if she could get some more money from the commission for her own use, was immediately struck dumb by Xiao Feng's answer. She didn't understand. Just now they had said that they could be hired with money, so why couldn't they do it now? Seeing the confusion on Jin Ying's large face, Xiao Feng shook his head and seriously said, Eunuch Jin presumably knows that I am only a company commander and belong to a branch of the mercenary army. There are officers above me, so I can only report your request to the higher-ups. As for whether they will accept or not, that will depend on the higher-ups. What? You mean that your position doesn't allow you to make the decision on this matter? Jin Ying had thought that Xiao Feng was the head of the mercenary army, but to her surprise he didn't even have the authority to make the decision. That's right, I truly don't have the authority to make the decision. Of course, if your emperor is willing, you can report the price first. I will immediately report the situation. I think it won't take long before we get a reply. Xiao Feng nodded and said in a businesslike tone. Upon hearing that he still had to report the matter, Jin Ying considered the current situation in the capital and realized that he probably didn't have much time to prepare. Thus he anxiously asked, then how long will it take for you to report the matter? That will depend on luck. If everything goes smoothly, it should be about a month or two. Xiao Feng pretended to be thinking very seriously, and after thinking for a while he very cautiously replied. Yang Chendong had naturally thought of this answer so that Jin Ying wouldn't have any other ideas. Reality proved that when Jin Ying heard this answer he immediately became listless. Only now did he realize that what Xiao Feng had said wasn't a problem with the money, but rather how to interpret it. This was Yang Chendong's method of giving people hope and then giving them disappointment. In order to prevent others from thinking that these mercenaries were directly related to him, he couldn't refuse Jin Ying's request, but he also couldn't fulfill his wish. In this way the delaying technique could be put to good use. Jin Ying left in disappointment, not even offering a price. He probably also knew that if he waited for Xiao Feng to report the matter, who knew how long he would have to wait. At that time whether or not the capital even existed would be up in the air. Trying to change the situation would be pointless. Upon returning to the imperial palace, Jin Ying truthfully reported his meeting with Xiao Feng to Zhu Qiu. At this time, Zhu Qiu had already awoken from his rage at Yang Chendong's request, or perhaps it could be said that he was no longer so angry. When he heard Jin Ying's report he let out a long sigh and said, So, we can only agree to the loyal marquis request? I'm afraid that's the only thing we can do, Jining weakly replied. The emperor trusted him so much, but if he couldn't even handle such a small matter, he truly felt that he had no face left. Beloved official, what do you think of this matter? If I agree to the loyal marquis request and allow him to set up a private bank, what kind of adverse effect will it have on us? Knowing that there was no other choice, Zhu Qiu began to face the problem of the Yang clan's bank. Jin Ying had already begun to consider this matter on the way back from the restaurant. Since the mercenary route was not feasible, they could only face Yang Chendong. The matter of the bank had to be placed before them. Hearing Zhu Qian's question, Jin Ying hesitated for a moment, and then a vicious light flashed through his eyes as he said, Your Majesty, this might not be a bad thing. You can agree to let him set up a Yang clan bank. As long as Walla retreats, won't Your Majesty have the final say in your territory? What if the loyal marquis is not here one day? Don't you think that the money in the bank will be confiscated? If that's the case, everything the loyal marquis is doing now is just making a wedding dress for Zhen. Beloved official, is this what you mean? Zhu Qiu originally had this idea, but he was the emperor. This kind of matter of getting rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness was not good, so as to avoid other people's gossip. However, Jining was completely different. He was just a eunuch. For someone who wasn't complete, it was normal for him to do anything. Your Majesty is wise. Jin Ying saw that Zhu Qiu understood what he meant and immediately knelt on the ground and exclaimed, Ah, good. The problem was solved so easily. Zhu Qiu couldn't help but be in a good mood. If that's the case, what's the harm in agreeing to his request? Not only that, we should also create momentum for him. How about this? When the Yang family bank is established, the imperial palace will also deposit some silver into it. Presumably with this emperor taking the lead, there will definitely be many people depositing silver, and the amount won't be small, right? Yes, Your Majesty is wise. When the Yang clan bank is set up, it will be a fat pig. Once it's fattened up, Your Majesty can slaughter it at any time and use it for your own purposes. Jining also chuckled at the side. At this moment, the two officials had malicious smiles on their faces. If Yang Chendong saw this, he would definitely be overjoyed. In the Yang clan manner, Xiao Feng had already rushed back and reported the first sentence he said to Jin Ying from the beginning to the end of their meeting. If Jin Ying was present at this moment, she would definitely be very surprised. Company Commander Xiao Feng, who had said that he didn't care about the loyal marquis, was now so respectful and careful when he saw Yang Chendong. You've done well. Go and have a good rest. Yang Chendong, who was very satisfied with Xiao Feng's performance, smiled and watched him leave. He knew that after this meeting, even if Zhu Qiu didn't agree, he would have to agree. In this way, the Yang clan bank would be recognized by the imperial family, and its development would be just around the corner. Of course, with Yang Chendong's intelligence, it was impossible that he hadn't thought of Zhu Qiu's revenge. However, killing him was undoubtedly a fool's dream. He would let the other party be happy for a while. When the Yang clan bank really became strong, it would be too late for regrets. Tiger's Mane, immediately send a message to Gao Xiong in Qiqian City. Have him transport all the gold stored in the city and plundered from the sea to the capital. I have great use for it. Yang Chendong gave the order after some thought. The matter of the Yang clan bank would soon be resolved. In comparison, this was a profitable business. With money, he would have a foundation for development. With money, he could do many things that he wanted to do. At that moment, he hummed a little tune as he walked towards the rear courtyard. There were 4 outstanding beauties waiting for him there, waiting for him to appear. Chapter 177. In the main hall of the Imperial Palace, the officials had gathered early in the morning for a meeting. There was only one topic for this so-called meeting: who should lead the army to battle Walla. In yesterday's imperial court, Vice Minister Su Yozhen of Taichung Temple had recommended that Marquis of Loyalty Yang Chendong lead the army. Zhu Qiu had not agreed on the spot and had instead given the officials one day. Early this morning, this topic had become the first matter to be resolved. Last night, another report had come from the front lines. Commander and Commander-in-Chief Wuxia Count Shiheng had led a defeated army of less than 30,000 retreating toward Datong. There was nothing in front of Walla's army to block their path, and they were able to pass through Jiong Pass and head straight for the capital. This meant that the enemy would arrive at the capital in 7 days at the slowest and 4 at the fastest. If the capital was still unprepared, it would be broken through and everyone would be captured or killed. With the situation so grim, a candidate had to be chosen. Jean Ying announced the news she had received last night in front of all the officials. There were those in the imperial court who were terrified, uneasy and pale. Civil officials used their mouths while military officials used their sabers. In times of peace, etiquette came first and reason was paramount. This naturally created a situation in which civil officials suppressed military force. But in an emergency situation, reason naturally did not make sense. Trying to reason with the enemy was tantamount to telling a tiger in the mountains to switch to a vegetarian diet. How laughable was that? It was no different from walking into the tiger's den. When they saw that the war was unavoidable, the civil officials naturally shut their mouths. On the contrary, they even revealed expressions of fear. They were completely different people compared to how they were in the past, talking about the past and discussing the present. Who wouldn't be afraid of death? After repeated defeats, Walla's army had placed an enormous pressure on the officials. One could truly say that they paled at the mere mention of it. In this situation, now that there was a candidate to recommend, the officials naturally did not hold back on their praise. Minister of War Yiming proposed that Marquis of Loyalty Yang Chendong lead the army. This new minister was truly rather afraid that if there was no suitable candidate, Dai Zong would have him lead the army into battle. If that happened, what difference would it be from sending him to his death? With the Minister of War taking the lead, the other officials naturally agreed. At this moment they were treating a dead horse as if it were still alive. And it wasn't just the officials. Even Hu Xiao and Hu Chongning, who had opposed the idea yesterday, were now among the officials who supported it. Not only did they support Yang Chendong leading the army, they also requested that he be given great authority. They also said that if the army could not be unified, countless variables could appear on the battlefield. Obviously, when they returned to the Hu estate yesterday, Yang Chendong's words could be considered to have convinced the Hu father and son, which was why they had such a change today. The crowd of courtiers almost unanimously supported Yang Chendong. Sitting high on the dragon throne, Zhu Qiu knew that the general trend could not be changed. At the imperial court, he ordered people to go forward and pass on the imperial decree for Yang Chendong to attend the imperial court. At this moment, the newly ascended emperor had clearly made up his mind. In the Yang clan manner, Yang Chendong wore a black gauze hat and a turtleneck shirt. There was a python pattern on the chest patch and a belt around his waist. He looked like a third-rank official as he sat in the main hall. Beside him, Hu Yen, Qiao Yin, Lady Shui, Lady Xiang and Yang Duo were pointing and laughing. From time to time they would cover their mouths with their hands and chuckle. Clearly, this was the first time they had seen the sanctimonious Yang Chendong. Is there something wrong with that? Seeing that the 5 women's eyes were so curious and changing, Yang Chendong finally couldn't help but ask if there was a problem. No, it's very good. I used to see grandfather and father dressed like this when they went to court. I just didn't expect 6th Lang to have such a day, so I'm very curious. Hu Yen covered her mouth and chuckled while shaking her head. She wanted to pretend to be serious, but no matter how she looked at it, she could not hide the smile on her face. There was really nothing wrong with Yang Chendong's clothes. If there was anything to blame, it could only be blamed on his young age. He was not even 20 years old, yet he was dressed so formally. It gave the girls a feeling that he was too dignified and ridiculous. Is there really no problem? Yang Chendong asked with some disbelief. He glanced at the women one by one. Apparently he did not believe Hu Yan's words just now. There's really no problem. Seeing the disbelief on Yang Chendong's face, 7th sister Yang Duo stood up. It's just because you rarely wear court attire, so everyone is not used to it. Yes, I'm also not used to it. Forget it, I won't wear it. Come, take it off for the young master. Yang Chendong also felt uncomfortable after wearing these clothes, so he simply decided to stay away from them. As he spoke, he really took off the court attire. Qiao Yin stepped forward to help and asked with doubt, 6th Lang, do you really want to take it off? Didn't you say that the emperor would send an edict to invite you to enter the palace in a while? There's nothing wrong with entering the palace, but who stipulated that I have to wear court attire to enter the palace? It's so awkward, so it's better not to wear it. Yang Qindong smiled and shook his head. In his heart he was thinking, I don't have the intention to be an official of the great Ming dynasty, so why do I have to abide by their rules? Besides, if I can't even make this decision and have this little freedom, then I'll be too pitiful. After taking off the court attire and changing into a new set of green clothes, Yang Qindong felt incomparably comfortable. He couldn't help but laugh. That's right. Nothing is more important than being yourself. You should also remember, unless it's an important occasion, you can wear whatever you want. Wear whatever is comfortable. Life is only a few decades, so don't be too hard on yourself. Just as he changed into a new set of green clothes, a eunuch came to pass on a message from outside the Yang family manor, asking the loyal marquis to immediately enter the palace. The emperor and all the civil and military officials were waiting for him. Tiger's Mane had already prepared a healthy horse. Yang Qindong nimbly flipped onto the horse and waved at the women behind him. Then, under the protection of Tiger's Mane and Qiu Vi, the first guard, he went straight to the capital. Hu Yan watched her husband leave. When she couldn't see his shadow anymore, she put on the appearance of a big sister. She turned around to look at Xiao Yin and the other two girls and said, Lu Lang has left. According to his instructions last night, we must immediately take action. Second sister Xiao Yin will stay in the Yang family manor to take care of the overall situation. Third sister Lady Shui and fourth sister Lady Xiang will go to the capital. As long as there are cheap properties and fields, buy them and register them. We'll listen to big sister's instructions. Xiao Yin, Xiao Yuxue and Dong Hanxiang hurriedly agreed. Yang Duo and her daughter were left behind. Seeing everyone start to get busy, their faces were filled with envy. At this time her thoughts were also changing. In her eyes, women were no longer just women who knew how to take care of their husbands and children. They could actually do many things. In the imperial court, the officials had been standing here for a long time. Some of the more impatient officials even looked out of the hall more than once, as if they were waiting for something. Amidst the anticipation of the officials, a eunuch's typical Drake-like voice rang out. The loyal marquis requests an audience. He's here, he's here. When the officials heard the shout, they hurriedly straightened their clothes and stood in place. Even Zhu Qiu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, subconsciously straightened his dragon robe and looked outside the hall with bright eyes. Amidst everyone's anticipation, the azure-robed Yang Qindong strode into the throne room. The last time he came to the throne room, it was the second day after he entered the capital. He had beaten Wang Go and received the treatment of beating the drum. Compared to before, this time he was less nervous and uneasy. The imperial court had long ago decreed that when entering the hall to meet the emperor, one had to wear the corresponding official robes. But at this time Yang Qindong was dressed in azure-robed and entered the imperial court, yet no one said anything. Even the censors who loved to nitpick acted as if they did not see him. Subject Yang Qindong pays respects to your majesty. My majesty is. Yang Qindong entered the hall and knelt when he was 10 some steps away from the throne. After allowing Yang Qindong to kneel in front of him, Zhu Qiu raised his hand and said, All right, loyal marquis, stand up and speak. Thank you, your majesty. Even though he did not like kneeling in front of the officials in the imperial court, there were some etiquette that could not be discarded. After answering, Yang Qindong slowly stood up. When he stood up, he stood there like a javelin, giving off the feeling that no matter what wind blew he would not move. Standing among the officials was Hu Zhongning. He had been practicing martial arts since he was a child and had some skill. At this moment, when he saw Yang Qindong's performance, he could not help but have a thought in his mind. His son-in-law seemed to be a martial artist and his strength should not be weak. But why did he not notice it before? Yang Qindong stood where he was. Zhu Qiu, who did not understand martial arts, naturally could not see Yang Qindong's true strength. His intuition told him that the loyal marquis was standing there with great vigor. Loyal marquis, we have summoned you to this hall to discuss matters. I presume that you also know what is going on? Walla's army is threatening the capital, and the officials have recommended you to lead the army. We also believe in loyal marquis, but are you willing to do your duty for the country? Even though he had already sent Jin Ying to privately discuss this matter with Yang Qindong, he still had to do his duty. At this moment he still had to go through the proper procedures. This subject is willing to do his duty for the country, share His Majesty's burden, and do his best for the peace and prosperity of the great Ming. Anyone could say beautiful words, and at this moment, Yang Qindong had put on a perfect display of the relationship between ruler and subject. Good. Zhu Qiu was elated to see Yang Qindong so readily agree. Loyal Marquis, hear this. You are made General of Swift Cavalry, primary second rank, and left Commander-in-Chief of the 5 armies of the capital. You are in charge of the large and small armies of the capital, and you are in charge of all the soldiers in the city. Since he was going to be put in an important position and at this critical moment, a promotion was only natural. As for controlling all the soldiers in the city, this was naturally because of the urgency of the situation, and he had no choice but to give Zhu Qiu this important authority. Zhu Qiu was keenly aware that this was a battle of life and death, so he naturally could not be careless. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.